Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cinematic Schematic, the official podcast of thecinematropolis.com, your home to thoughtful conversations on film. Today, we are talking about the little golden men appearing on the Super Bowl of movies, celebrating 2023's biggest films. If only they had the ratings of the Super Bowl, which is now the most televised event in history this year. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about the 96th Academy Awards. We'll start by breaking the ice with our opinions and overall thoughts on this year's program, including the nominees, and then we'll move on to our main feature of this week's special episode, an annual tradition here at the Cinematropolis. We will go through most of the Oscar categories and provide our predictions. I say most because I'm just going to set expectations right now. Sorry, no short animated film, short film, or short documentary. Sorry, guys. And of course, we can't do the Oscars show alone. We're rejoined for, Laron, what's this, like the seventh year? I think seventh year. For the seventh year by my co-host and award-winning Oklahoma filmmaker, Laron Chapman. Laron, welcome back.
Thanks for having me. It is Christmas in February for me to have this conversation. So I feel like I spend an exorbitant amount of time throughout the year preparing for this conversation. So I'm informed and happy to be here.
I'm so happy you're here. Laron, I just want you to know, I know you were going to be, unfortunately, out of town the night of the Oscars.
I'll be at South by Southwest, but I'm hearing that we will find us a nice little cozy spot to watch it there while we're there. So,
which is perfect.
Yeah.
You being at South by Southwest that night is the best news for everyone else who's attending my Oscars party who wants to actually win the prize, because otherwise they would be screwed.
Yes, that is fair. That is fair.
Also, super excited to be rejoined for the second year in a row. She's the arts and entertainment features writer for the Oklahoman, Brandy McDonnell. Brandy, welcome back.
Thanks for having me again this year.
Well, after your tar take last year, I thought that we have to have you back.
Tar takes.
I don't have any of them this year that I'm that mad about. So, I mean, not about the ones that are nominated. There's a few that aren't nominated that I'm pretty irritable about, but I don't think I'm tar levels of rancor about anything.
Well, listeners, before we get into our annual discussion where we predict the Oscars, firstly, hey, if you are planning to watch the Oscars, I believe that is the evening of Sunday, March 10th, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, a new time. These are our takes. We are offering this free consulting to you as an opportunity if you want to look like the coolest person at your Oscars party. And we will absolutely not be held accountable in any way if you're wildly wrong. This is me making a disclaimer right now.
Please leave a comment.
Yeah. But if you're right, you do owe it to us to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, because, ladies and gentlemen, I want to get to 200 reviews this year. We're only at number 40. So to get there, that means if you have an iPhone, you should pull up your iPhone. You go to the podcast app. You look up the podcast. You scroll to the bottom and hit 5 stars. Please do it. Let us know what you think of the show. And hey, maybe you have some feedback or some thoughts you want us to know. Include that in a little review, or maybe you just love the show and you can just put that, love the show. If you can leave us that rating review specific on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, we would really appreciate your support. Without further ado, let's get into our overall thoughts on this year's Oscar nominations. Laron, we've had a few sort of small talks here and there in earlier episodes, kind of reacting to the Oscar narrative conversation. But what are your overall thoughts on this year's nominations?
I had to sneak watch the awards this year because I was bright and early starting pre-production on a film that was shooting here locally. And, I had to pretend to go to the bathroom for 20 minutes just so I can hear them live and not watch the recaps of them. But I was, there were a couple of surprises, but for the most part, I was, the things I expected to happen here did. And I'm generally pretty happy with the nominees. I think all of the Best Picture nominees this year, I awarded a 4 or a 4.5 on Letterboxd. So I liked all the movies this year. There's not like a weird outlier where I'm like, why the hell is this here? You know what I mean? Like,
which the Oscars has a reputation of doing.
Yeah, there's normally 2 that you're like, huh? So I'm happy with the ones that are here. So, obviously there are some misses. I would have loved to have seen a Greta Lee nomination here. That would have swapped maybe Annette Bening, who I'm also gunning to have an Oscar one day, but not this year.
Not for Naiad.
Not for Naiad, like maybe something else, but Greta Lee would have been a really nice roundup. That would have been a perfect lineup for me.
That's listeners. That is Greta Lee, the star of Past Lives.
Yes. And I would have also liked to have seen a surprise Celine song director nomination
Yes.
here. That's something that I personally it's one of my favorite movies this year. It's a small movie. Before we got to the juggernauts of the fall season, I really feel like that it seemed like Past Life was in the winning conversation, and then it very quickly was not, So I'd hope that we would see one of those kind of sneak in here.
Celine Song did get nominated for screenplay.
She did, yeah.
Which is not director,
but
noteworthy.
But noteworthy, absolutely.
And for her first film, by
Absolutely,
the way.
yeah, for her debut. Very, very, very impressive. Also, no May December Love, zero whatsoever. I would have liked to have seen a Charles Melton here, or
that is crazy. That was the talk for a while.
Yeah,
that
he was considered the third choice here for so long, and then it showed up in screenplay, I think, but that's it. And then finally, I was a big fan of All of Us Strangers. Would have loved to have seen a couple of acting noms there, But other than that, I mean, for the most part, everything that's here, I enjoyed for the most part. So.
More bad news for All of Us Strangers fans. Apparently, it's not getting a physical release, is something I read online.
Oh, really?
I'm going to validate that, but the Fox 20th Century person on Twitter had posted about it.
Oh.
And to fact check that.
That's frustrating.
That is deeply sad because that movie is fantastic and people should see it. Brandy, what are your overall thoughts on this year's nominations?
Well, I would say overall, I felt like this was a pretty strong lineup and a pretty strong year for movies, almost to the point where maybe it's just me, but I wonder, is there anything that's going to even be worth seeing in 2024? A little bit. It makes you a little bit worried for 2024. Maybe we should save some of these for 2024. I mean, just wondering. But I'm pretty happy with like all but one, and this comes to my Yorgos, I guess, disclaimer, which is that I'm not the biggest fan. I'm not a big fan of the born sexy yesterday woman child sort of trope. I feel like it's very overdone. And so I've not watched Poor Things yet because, I honestly told somebody this and made them laugh. But if a meteor hits the earth or I die suddenly, I don't want to have necessarily wasted time watching that movie unless it becomes absolutely necessary. So I will probably watch it before the Oscars, but it will probably be the last thing I do before the Oscars. Like, oh, well, okay, I guess I have to watch it now. I don't hate his work. It just doesn't really resonate with me too much. And it does, unfortunately, in this case, it feels wildly predictable to me because when I heard there was going to be an adaptation, but it was going to be gender swapped of Frankenstein, it's like, oh, well, it'll be all about sex. And I'm not saying it's all about sex, but there's a lot about sex. It's like, of course, if the monster is going to be female, she's going to be sort of a manic pixie child who has to figure out what sex is. And it's like, oh, thanks for doing exactly what I thought you were going to do with it. So
it's not all about sex, but it is, and that sex
It's
is
used
the
a lot,
is
but
the
yeah.
mechanism in which she discovers her identity and her worldview.
Yeah.
And we think that that's exactly how, if it were a male monster, that's how he'd figure out his identity, right?
You raised a great point.
It's a great question.
I mean,
it's a great question.
It's an overused trope for a reason. That whole, there's so many things that you know, everything from Splash to Fifth Element. She was born yesterday. She's completely innocent, but she's god awful sexy. Please teach her everything she needs to know, but make sure you use sex for it. And I'm just not a huge fan of the trope. Not a big enough fan of the filmmaker to necessarily take that ride with him until it becomes absolutely necessary, which again will probably be the day before the Oscars. I'll be like, all right, I guess I'll watch your movie so that I can,
So that when they play the clips and Emma wins the Oscar, you can roll your eyes and be like, ugh, why?
If Emma beats Lily Gladstone for that Oscar, I'm joining a group of Native ladies I know to ride on the Academy. So they better watch out. No, that's one that I definitely feel strongly about on this. I'm sure we'll talk more about that when we talk about Best Actress, but I love Lily Gladstone, and I think she was fantastic, and she made that movie. I was not disappointed about a movie that I'd spent nearly 3 years writing about, and that is pretty impressive to me. But I think 90% of the reason why I loved it as much as I did was because of her. And so I think she's fantastic. I think that her nomination is way overdue, and I think she absolutely deserves to win. And I will accept nothing less than that in good grace anyway. So
If she were to, we'll talk about more later, but I will just put it this way. I feel like, and you can weigh the merits of Emma Stone's performance, but I'm feeling like if she wins, we're going to look back in like 10 years and be like, we could have given it to Lily Gladstone, who has I just feel like Killers of the Flower Moon is going to have more staying power in the long run. Frankly, nothing against Poor Things, a movie I liked. I didn't love as much as Laron or a lot of people, but I like it. But I just don't think it's going to have the sort of impact that Killers of the Flower Moon has had. Personally, I could be wrong. Laron, 10 years from now,
we'll have this conversation.
You can tell me I'm wrong.
This,
I guess book it. But I mean, I also would have loved to have seen Greta Lee get a Best Actress nod. I would have loved to have seen. I was a big fan of The Holdovers. I would have loved to have seen Dominic Sessa get a supporting actor nomination. I was disappointed. That was probably one of the ones I was most disappointed in that category. I was not as disappointed about Margot Robbie not being in Best Actress, but I am disappointed not to see Greta in Best Director. I don't know if the Academy can hear me, but it's okay if there's two women.
There's two women
in the Best Director category, and if it happens 2 years in a row, I promise you,
it's okay.
It's okay. The globe won't stop turning. It won't accelerate climate change any more than it already has been accelerated. It's fine.
I don't know. I hear Barbie used a lot of pink paint, so much so that the carbon footprint of the movie grew tremendously. I'm just joking.
No. Yeah, I really do feel like that's something that's like, oh, well, you can't be mad because there's a woman nominated, and it's like, really? I can still be mad. I promise. So I am disappointed to see that somebody. I feel like the director category ought to reflect. I mean, it's obvious that there's going to be some people left out, right? I mean, there's 10 movies that are nominated for Best Picture.
5 people are going to be not
so
going to be there.
5 people at least are going to be there. But I do feel like the people who win Best Director ought to be indicative of somebody who is the vision of the film, right?
Right.
That's fair.
Essentially what it ought to be. And I think it's very difficult to look at Barbie and look at the impact and look at the success of that film and not say, oh, it owes something to that director's vision.
Right.
Right?
No,
I don't disagree.
No,
I just feel like that's something that really was disappointing because it didn't feel like her vision, she was rewarded for that. And I feel like as a woman watching the Oscars and a female film critic and some things like that, you know things that are coming. It's like, oh, she's going to get the consolation prize, the screenplay award. Got it. Except for now it's adapted screenplay because it's based on copyrighted material.
Yeah,
that's
a problem.
That's a whole thing.
It's a doll.
Yeah.
It's a doll.
Yeah.
Really? It's a doll.
And the thing is, I know people are like, well, but there are those little Barbie cartoons. Like, yeah, but it's not adapted from those.
It's not adapted from
No,
those
this is
at
a bold
all.
original idea that includes the toy.
And every
it's a problem.
precursor award up to this point
Was original.
has an original.
Yes.
The Academy is the only one who has
Who
decided
that this should be adapted.
Very unusual.
I think you see some weirdness in like some of the like peculiarities of the Academy, and their rules really show up this year in very odd ways and interesting ways. I feel like that's a big one of like everybody saying this is original material except the Oscars, who decide that this is an adapted screenplay. I think another one is Anatomy of a Fall, which I really, really liked, but it's the only, I mean, it's got all these nominations. It's not nominated for Best International Film because that's not the one that got through the formal process of France deciding to make that their official, nominee, which I think is a very odd system when you think about it. I mean, it's a very strange system. I think it sort of exposed some of the weakness of that system, which is you have a movie that was big at Cannes, you have a movie that has gotten all of these other nominations, and it's not gonna vie for international feature,
which it would certainly win, almost
because,
certainly.
And it doesn't even get a chance because the national film mechanism of France had to decide that was the one to enter in the contest.
And I'm telling you, between that and the Zone of Interest, I think that would have been a real race too.
Yeah, sure.
Really would have,
And I think now it's like obviously not one. So
You mentioned adapted screenplay, and I want to talk a little more about Barbie in a second. What's interesting there, though, is I hear you. You are correct. I do think director is a very competitive category. Personally, if I were writing it, I would drop either Yorgos or Glazer and put Gerwig in there for my tastes. But I can understand the argument that why you wouldn't do that. Still, I agree. There's no rule that says 2 women who made exceptional films, and there's at least 3 I can think of right off the top of my head could be nominated. And then on the screenplay, though, that one's interesting because by switching it to adapted, it actually kicked Killers of the Flower Moon out of that category.
It did.
So which I'm disappointed in, but also I think that is a testament to that screenplay, that it's kicking a Martin Scorsese co-written film out of a screenplay nomination, which also is not really a great sign for Killers of the Flower Moon.
She and Noah did create it. They did it. That's that is their DNA all over that film, and so there's acknowledgement there. But I do agree with you that I would have liked to have seen Greta there. It was not a good day for women named Greta that day at the Oscars.
Right.
Well, and I think that it did overshadow some of the things that were good. I mean, this is some of the most diverse set of nominees that
which is normally the
have.
narrative every year. It's like
we don't have any diversity. That's normally a big problem here, and we don't have that problem. And so I feel like it's easy to get lost in that whole outrage over that one thing. But I mean, there's some really great things that happened this year in terms of the nominees. I mean, 2 African American men in Best Actor. I mean,
yeah,
yeah. The planet didn't stop turning, Laron. It didn't.
Look, yeah,
So
exactly.
look,
it's fine. You can do that.
fine.
You don't even have to look at it this way.
One
You
in
just-
Lily Gladstone being first indigenous woman nominated for Best Lead Actor.
First
Indigenous
Native
American.
American. Yeah,
Thank
Native
you. Indigenous
American.
American.
Yeah, of
Yes.
course. Yeah, right.
Thank you. Good. A very important distinction there.
Yes, because there have been indigenous women, but they have not been Native American women, so they're not American. So
I'm going to dig into Barbie a little more in a second. I just really quickly want to echo overall, I thought the nominations were really strong. Like Laron, you said, there's no weird, why is this movie here? We're not going to have to worry about being upset that Green Book is beating,
no,
First
don't
Reformed.
look ups
Yeah.
or what,
Right.
It's
A few snubs that you guys haven't already mentioned, and these are probably a little more personal to me. Best original score, I really thought the Academy, I feel like sometimes takes big steps forward for animated films, and then they take 2 steps back. And in this case, I really felt like both Daniel Pemberton for Across the Spider-Verse and Joe Hisaishi for The Boy and the Heron had
Great scores.
incredible scores, like my
Yes.
2 favorite scores of the year. And it got beat out by American Fiction. Got beat out
And I
by
can't even remember
which again, I like that movie, but the score was certainly not
The standout.
not even
Yeah.
close. I couldn't tell hum the tune to that movie.
Yeah.
Indiana Jones again. I love John Williams.
Yeah.
I didn't really think that was an especially
How different is it though?
Right.
That's the issue.
It's playing the greatest hits.
Yeah.
basically.
It's
It's not bad. It's
yeah,
fine.
but it's-
So anyway, small nitpick. On that note, I really would have loved to have seen The Boy and the Heron get a Best Picture nomination. Didn't think it was going to happen, but there was that part of my heart that was hoping we get an animated in that lineup of 10. And then, of course, I've already mentioned it. No Killers of the Flower Moon in adapted screenplay. I made the joke about Leo. Disappointed, maybe a little bit, but frankly, I really appreciate how he has really used the campaign to promote Lily Gladstone even before the nominations came out, because he's basically like, yeah, this is her movie.
Yeah.
Let's.
And to be honest, I know he was one of the snubs that people mentioned that was kind of expected. And Leo's great. I love Leo. He had his narrative the year of The Revenant where people were like, give him, how many
Please
times,
give it to him.
How many times has he been snubbed?
Yeah.
He had his moment in the spotlight for that, and he's gotten that. So he doesn't need this nomination, even if some people think he deserved it maybe. And I honestly feel the same way about Robert De Niro. I think they're both great. I think they're both great in the movie. I think they've proven to be great. I just think this isn't the year where it's like they have to have them. They're overly decorated. We know who they are. Everyone, you know what I mean? Like the fact that Lily Gladstone was in a Scorsese movie with 2 titans and steals the movie, you know what I mean? this is
Just
her
tell you
year.
what you need to know.
It tells you what
Yeah.
you need to know about this year and who we should be focusing on.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah. So that's my note about Leo. It's like, it would have been nice to have seen him, but also, like you said, there's that him not being there leaves room for other incredible performers, and he's able to use his leverage clout to promote who's the real star of the film, frankly, at least the heart of the film, I would say. So, okay. Public outcry on Barbie. It's the elephant in the room. We've already talked around it. No Greta Gerwig nomination. So Laron, like you, the nominations came out on a day when I was unavailable. I was literally offline that day.
Yeah.
Like the whole day. 10 p.m. and I finally get to look at the nominations. And wowza, there was some people. I'm looking. I'm like, oh, this is a pretty good lineup. I'm surprised. There's a few surprises. No Greta Gerwig and director. I'm like, oh, it's kind of a bummer. Yeah, I would have liked to have seen Greta Lee. That's cool. Okay, well, you know what? This is a pretty good run. Like, we've mentioned the positives, a lot of diversity. These are all good movies. No weird disappointments. I wonder what the internet... Oh, my God. The Oscars are sexist. Oh, They didn't nominate Margot Robbie or Greta Gerwig in their categories. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's a good point. That's kind of weird that Ryan Gosling would get nominated for Best Supporting Actor, but then Margot Robbie doesn't get Best Lead Actress. On the surface, I'm like, yeah, I can see why people were mad. But then you stop and actually look. Wait, Barbie got 8 nominations, though. So I just want to turn it over to you guys to talk, and I'll start with you, Bam. Like, in terms of Barbie's sort of placement at the Oscars, you mentioned you're disappointed by Greta Gerwig, which I think is a very reasonable disappointment. And I'm definitely a lot more upset about that one than I am Margot Robbie. But what's your take on how the film has been treated and exactly how that conversation online has shaped up? I mean, Hillary Clinton's over here tweeting about it, and it's just like, wow.
You're Knuff, she said.
I really just think that it's a little bit of a perfect storm, the reaction, because it sort of fulfills the message of the movie, doesn't it? I mean, whenever, like, literally Ryan Gosling gets nominated and Margot and Greta get left out, it's sort of like, of course. It's like you sort of make the point of the movie, right? Whenever that happens. And so I think for people, it just worked out in that it was something that people could really grasp onto, like like why it was unfair.
Yeah.
I mean, I think people could really look at it and say, this is what the movie talked about, and this is what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. And I think that, you know, I just really feel like people were disappointed because it made such an impact. It made such a pop culture impact. And that wasn't ignored. But at the same time, like, what does exactly she have to do to win Best Director? Like, what's she got to do at this point? She's been nominated once or twice. I can't remember which.
I know for Lady Bird, right? And
Definitely.
Then,
yeah,
but I
and
don't
then
remember.
twice for screenplay, because once for Little Women and once for Lady
Mm-hmm.
Bird. But she's been nominated once. She broke every record in every category with this film and made a enormous cultural impact, because obviously box office isn't everything. But she made an enormous cultural impact with a film that had a very resonant message, but also a film that, again, I think that there's so much of it is that this is her vision. It's
Her vision of Barbie.
Her vision of Barbie, of a film that people have tried to make now for 10 years, that's gone through all of these different iterations. And you take something like Barbie that's got a lot of, I think it's very complicated how people feel, particularly women, feel about Barbie. But you take all of that and you wrap it all up into something that's amazing, awesome. It has such impact, and she still can't even get nominated, much less win Best Director. I feel like it just really felt like salt and like really rubbed into the wounds of what Barbie's talking about. I mean, I really feel like that's a lot of the beef that people have. I was very disappointed that she wasn't nominated, and I really feel like it's hard to argue that these people did a better job of being a director for their film.
Do you think, though, the 8 nominations, including American Ferrera and Supporting Actress, and Margot Robbie is still nominated as a producer.
Right.
For Best Picture. Greta Gerwig is still nominated for Screenplay. Right. Is that like a more insulting consolation prize, or do you think that is a worthy acknowledgement that the movie was important?
I think it just kind of gets overshadowed by the fact that this was the thing that it felt like it deserved, I guess, to people. I'm not going to say right or wrong on that, but I also think that there's a sense that it's not going to be Oppenheimer for Best Picture, that the Academy is going to follow its usual path on what it decides to honor. So it was probably never going to give it to Barbie. And so the nomination was supposed to be like the award, I think, to a lot of people, and she doesn't even get nominated. So I feel like that is really interesting to me to see all this play out. Particularly if you go back to Barbenheimer, right?
Mm-hmm.
You go back to these two films going head to head and all this kind of stuff to save the box office and things like that. And then clearly Barbie won as a box office.
Oh yeah.
Although you cannot scoff at the box office.
Yeah, $1 billion for a adult rated R drama is not nothing.
Yeah, that's not nothing at all. But then I feel like you've seen Oppenheimer pretty much own the awards season, and I don't think that that's going to change with the Oscars. And so I think that for a lot of people, it's just disappointing to see that she didn't get that nomination. I think so much of it for so many people really centers on the fact that women have been so left out of the directorial category as it is, that it just feels, that snub feels worse because it's the Oscars letting us down again. So
right. No, I hear that. I think that's valid feeling. I would have been a lot more upset if there was no acknowledgement. I do think the screenplay is not nothing. If I were picking the nominations, I certainly would, like I said, there was at least 2 other people I would drop. But I also know a lot of people who think Zone of Interest is the best thing, like by a lot. I don't feel that way, but it's a tough choice.
I'm of 2 minds. I felt very similar to you, Brandy, when the nominations came out, and I was kind of just feeding into the entire atmosphere of outcry about it. And I when I say I'm of 2 minds, I am one of the people who is disappointed that she's not here. But I also feel like the kind of narrative, though, that I haven't quite subscribed to is that Ryan Gosling got something over Greta Gerwig because they're in separate categories and they have their own people they're competing against. If they were in the same category, then absolutely we'd be talking about it. Like, you chose a man over this, and she's the point of the movie, and but it's really for me is that Best Actress was a very competitive, you know what I mean, category this year, and she's fighting against that crop of actresses. And unfortunately, she was 6th or 7th in that race, if that makes sense. And whereas Ryan Gosling, maybe supporting actor, wasn't quite as competitive as Best Actress. And so, and he was obviously a bright spot in the movie. To be fair,
he gets the
moments.
He does get the flashiest moments in the movie, which the Academy has always gone for flashy performances.
Margot's definitely shouldering the emotional core of the movie, and that's what the role required of her. She's also has some charming moments, but he gets all the funny scenes still in comedic little quips and stuff, and so that maybe outshines some of the more, maybe less competitive, again, supporting actor race that we have here, and so he's probably number 2 in that race, So I feel like that part of it I reject. The idea, though, that yes, that Greta Gerwig made one of the most successful movies of all time. It did have a huge cultural impact. It did leave it, obviously so, because even so, like you said, like, I think people are responding to how much, like you said, it's likening the narrative of the movie, where Ken is getting more attention than the female in this. I think that shows you how well the movie resonated with audiences, because they're responding to those themes in the movie. I just don't know if they're neck and neck in that way.
I just feel like there's a big difference between the optics and then if you do the breakdown, which is, we've talked about the overwhelming diversity, both in terms of like race, but also like international. Tons of international films made the cut this year. So I have a hard time saying that the Academy is somehow more sexist. Or I get the letting you down thing. That I track that, and I understand what it feels like to be disappointed. And I think especially with it being Barbie being the breakout film of the year, I get it. But the thing that bothered me after analyzing and talking about the conversation is that it was soaking up
the fact that Lily Gladstone is nominated,
Right.
and
Celine Song's nominated.
and it's a historic thing.
Justin Trier's nominated.
And then we do have 2 black actors in the, so there were things that for me, but that's what I'm saying. But that in another year, if I was a woman, and this would probably be my narrative that year, you know what I mean? Like, so I can't over, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to downplay those sentiments. I
also think that there's something to be said for the history of it too, which is that yes, there are lots of these little Barbie films out there and things like that, but imagine if somebody had taken Transformers and suddenly turned it into a cultural phenomenon that everybody could resonate with. Yeah. And the Oscars said, that's not a best director thing. I mean, it's true. If it's like you get cut by both sides of that sword, right? On one hand, you have to be in best adapted screenplay and you're not acknowledged as an original idea because of all of this background of copyrighted material. But at the same time, you don't get the advantage of, there was all of this and I threw all that out the window and created a cultural phenomenon that could resonate and overcome all of the both honored and managed to overcome all of the baggage of the legacy of this cultural creation that is Barbie. And I feel like that's something that's, man, it's a little bit tough to have to swallow to say that isn't worthy of a best director nod.
Yeah. I also, it's the one category I do actually wish would expand in terms of numbers. I don't believe it everywhere. I do think directors should, I think if there's 10 films, there should be 10 directors. That's how I feel. But as far as actors, I understand the competitiveness of it. It makes more sense to be truncated.
I mean, if I was going to drop one of those, I would drop Annette Bening for Margot Robbie, but I also really don't want to drop Annette Bening. Like,
it's hard.
It's tough. And it's not that I think it's Margot Robbie. And again,
because I love her in the movie.
Oh, yeah.
I think she's great. And I think she's been great multiple times. She's been nominated twice. Like, was it I, Tonya and, lesser one I don't think as much, but Bombshell, yes. But she's been nominated twice, and this movie lives or dies on her. You know what I mean? Sure. Like, so you can't.
There's no Barbie without Margot Robbie.
Yeah, it's called Barbie. It's like, literally, it's called Barbie and Just Ken. But it's just, that's the joke. But it's like
in this scenario, the best, she's getting the recognition for the contribution and Best Picture.
Yeah.
And that's not to diminish her performance. It's
she
just saying that
produced the hell out of this, getting this made too. As much as it was Greta's vision.
She was the one who brought Greta on board.
Shepherding that, like, going to those rooms and telling people, we are going to make this movie and it's going to make you $1 billion, and it did. So
and she's like so much that it was so successful later. She's like, well, I believed in it, but I never thought it would be this successful.
Yeah, I don't think any of us did. I think I think we thought it would do well.
It did,
especially as the temperature started cooking throughout the year. But even still, it went beyond, I think, a lot of people's expectations. And
it's tough. Oscars are tough. Speaking of Christopher Nolan, I was there the year, not 100% the same, but I was there the year when he did not get nominated for Best Director of Inception, but did in fact get nominated for Original Screenplay, and it was disappointing.
I feel the same way about that scenario. I mean, obviously it doesn't have the optics of Barbie. I think that's part of what is so easy to hang your hat on here or get mad about or get your claws into it, I guess. Pick your whatever, like cliche you want to adopt. But I think that the optics of it makes it easier for people to get madder about it.
Right.
I think it's like, oh, forget Greta, forget the person who literally played Barbie in Barbie, but be sure to give a nomination for Ken.
Yeah.
I feel like
that has to happen. Yeah.
It's just like it's much easier for people to get mad about it because of the optics of it.
Yeah.
But I also think too that, man, that year with Inception, I'm interested that you brought that up because I remember thinking, well, that sucks. I mean, how could you not? It's Nolan's vision that makes that movie what it is, and that's how I feel about this one as well. Is that it's her vision that sort of makes this possible.
It's so tough. That's why I'm saying I understand. I think all of us understand what it's like to have a film you love and want to champion not get the credit where it's due. And I think Barbie, especially being one of the movies that saved theaters this year, it's like, come on.
Yeah.
That said,
because even beyond subjectivity here, like you can't say that movie didn't do something. Even if it wasn't your thing.
Huge impact.
You could see it did something for the culture, did something for the box office, and it's a good film. Yeah.
Absolutely. At the same time, we've all been here before for different movies, and it's not about, and obviously the gender, like, yes, based on what the movie's about, it kind of amplifies the feelings, and I think it's valid. It's a valid conversation to have. But also, like, how many times have we been like, well, man, they really messed up by not nominating not giving Leo the award for Wolf of Wall Street, or not giving him the nomination for Django Unchained. Let's move on and rank the Best Picture nominations, just so listeners have an idea of, hey, which films do we personally favor overall? Just a reminder, listeners, the 10 nominees for Best Picture are American Fiction, Anatomy of a Fall, Barbie, The Holdovers, Killers of the Flower Moon, Maestro, Oppenheimer, Past Lives, Poor Things, and The Zone of Interest. That said, Laron Chapman, give us the rundown.
Okay, I promise I'm not here to make Brandy upset, but my number one movie of the year is Poor Things. My number two movie of the year is Anatomy of a Fall. My third movie of the year is Past Lives. Number 4 is Oppenheimer. Number 5 is The Holdovers. Number 6 is Killers of the Flower Moon. Number 7 is Barbie. Number 8, I think I'm going out of order here. Am I missing one? Barbie, The Zone of Interest, and then ending on Maestro. Oh, I know what I did. I didn't put American Fiction in there. I would put American Fiction just after Barbie. So that would be my...
So that put that, what number?
Right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It'd be my number 8.
Number 8 film. All right. Brandy?
2 things for the record. 1, I have not watched Poor Things, as I've already noted. 2, I don't usually do a top 10 list, so I'm going to kind of do this a little bit off the top of my head. But
And again, it's not your top 10 films of the year. It's
how you would rank
how
them.
you would rank the
How
nominees.
you'd rank what's
Yeah.
here.
Killers of the Flower Moon, number 1 for me. Number 2 is Barbie. Number 3, Past Lives. Number 4 is Oppenheimer. Number 5 probably be The Holdovers. Number 6 is probably American Fiction. 7 would be Anatomy of the Fall. 8 would be Zone of Interest. Last would be Maestro.
I think that's a great list. Mine is number 1, Killers of the Flower Moon. Number 2, Oppenheimer. Number 3, Past Lives. Number 4, Anatomy of a Fall. Number 5, Barbie. Number 6, The Holdovers. Number 7, Poor Things. Number 8, The Zone of Interest. Number 9, American Fiction. And number 10, Maestro.
I think we had actually a lot of overlap on that list, really, believe it or not.
I think so.
I think all of us had
Everyone has
Past Lives
Maestro
number
at the
3.
bottom.
At the bottom.
And everyone has Past Lives, I think, is number 3.
Number 3. I love
So-
it. Oh, man. Past Lives. Breaking down barriers.
Love that
You and I
movie.
have Holdovers on 5, so
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Well, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's move on to our predictions for this year's show. So, if you haven't tuned in past years, just the way we do things is we are going to name the nominees in each category, starting with the screenplays, and we're going to make a personal selection of what should win, and then make a note about who actually will win. So, the difference is, what do we want to win in this category versus what is the Academy actually going to vote for? So, if you're playing a game at your Oscar watch party, the one you want to pencil on your ballot if you want to win, you know, the golden ticket is the will wins that we're talking about here. And as I've already noted, we're not covering the short animated films or short documentaries or short film categories. That said, let's move on to our first category, which is Best Adapted Screenplay. And the nominees for Best Adapted Screenplay are American Fiction, written for the screen by Cord Jefferson; Barbie, written by Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach; Oppenheimer, written for the screen by Christopher Nolan; Poor Things by Tony McNamara; and The Zone of Interest, written by Jonathan Glazer. Laron Chapman, my co-host, kick us off. Who will win? Who should win?
I feel like it's weird having, again, it's weird having Greta Gerwig in this category because it feels like that screenplay should definitely be an original screenplay. So I really think a lot of the love is going to go to her in this particular category. If I were picking like my personal favorite of this, I would put American Fiction as the should win in this, and have the will win likely being Oppenheimer. But I think that Greta Gerwig's, introduction to this category shakes things up. And I could see an upset with her here, as again somewhat of a consolation prize for not being nominated in other categories that people.
This is so weird because it kind of throws both of these screenplay categories out of whack, and it makes it harder to pick one.
Yeah.
So Laron's leaning towards a will win is going to be. Say it again, Laron.
A will win will probably be Greta Gerwig because of how everything is being shaken up. But my personal choice for the winner in this would have probably been American Fiction.
Had Barbie not been nominated.
Had Barbie not been nominated, it would have been American Fiction with Oppenheimer taking it. But I think because Greta Gerwig's here, she will likely take it.
All right. Bold choice, Laron Chapman. Brandy McDonnell?
I also think it's the correct choice, though, because I really, same. I mean, as we've talked about, I feel like it being an adapted screenplay does sort of throw everything out of whack. It is not what we've seen from the other award shows that this has happened in. But I do feel like that with this set of nominees under these circumstances, I think you have to say that Barbie will win and the Barbie should win. I definitely think that it should win out of this group, particular group of nominations. But I also think it will win in this particular case. But again, it's weird looking at these, as you noted, 2 categories and thinking, why are all of these here in this way?
Yeah.
Barbie, adapted from the toy line, competing against Oppenheimer, which is adopted from a novel, just feels like it's
adapted
weird.
from the minds of children. So, guys,
adapted from the minds of Greta Gerwig's childhood,
imagination. So,
So I'm gonna go. I'm gonna lean. Will win, should win with Barbie. I do think this will be sort of the air quotes consolation prize. I think it's a worthy one. I think this movie does deserve this award. I think the screenplay is fantastic. I do have maybe that 10% that says Oppenheimer could get it just as a part of the Oppenheimer sweep that we're anticipating. But I don't know. I think they're going to want to give Barbie something to take home. That's not just a technical award, you know. So I'm going to go will win, should win Barbie, but wouldn't be surprised if Oppenheimer won. Let's move on to Best Original Screenplay. And the nominees are Anatomy of a Fall. The screenplay is by Justin Thierry and Arthur Harai. The Holdovers, written by David Hemmingson. Maestro, written by Bradley Cooper and Josh Singer. May December, screenplay by Sammy Birch and story by Sammy Birch and Alex Mechanic. I said that closer to the right this time. And Past Lives, written by Celine Song. Brandy McDonnell, who wins the other screenplay category?
Again, it's so weird. It's just weird looking at because it's wrong.
It's like there's too much on the plate on one category, and then there's like just the vegetables on the other one.
Exactly. I mean, it's just a little bit. It's just odd, and you can see the things that are missing because of how I would argue Barbie has been miscategorized, and it makes this category, I feel like, a much weaker category. I don't know. It's weird. But I think that there are some worthy choices here. I would love to see Past Lives win this Oscar, and I'm going to say that given the way the category is, I think it should win. I think that what you're going to see is, I believe, under these circumstances, you'll probably see Anatomy of a Fall actually end up winning. I feel like there's going to be, again, gets a little bit into a psychology of Oscar voters, maybe. This is a film that did not get a chance to contend for best international film because of the peculiarities of the Oscars, and so I think that you're going to see it as a film that was widely appreciated by a lot of people, and this will be that consolation prize of giving it an original screenplay, as opposed to, because I don't think you're going to see Justine Triet win Best Director.
No way.
And obviously, you're not going to see it win International Film because it's not eligible because of the weird way that they do things at the Oscars. So I think this will be the will win. Not going to be mad about it because it is an excellent screenplay. I would prefer to see Past Lives win. But again, I think that that's my should. I think Anatomy of Fall will, and I'm not going to be mad about it.
And I also think the other thing is it has the narrative potential. It's not going to win those other awards, Anatomy of a Fall. However, Justin Triet didn't even have the backing of France, you know, to get into the Academy Awards, and she did it anyway.
Yeah.
And it's like we want to reward that sort of the quality craft and the campaigning efforts that you put in to overcome a lot of hurdles that others didn't have to contend with. So I think that gives her some edge there in terms of likelihood of winning. Laron?
Yeah, I think that narrative could be applies to 2 movies, Anatomy of the Fall and Past Lives, because Past Lives is only nominated for 2 Academy Awards, and one of them's picture. And so I feel like, personally, my choice is Past Lives in this category as well. But I think that the more award sweeper here, or the more love is going to go towards Anatomy of a Fall. It already did in terms of nominations, so clearly they favor one of these movies over the other. And so I think, and there's also a huge British contingent, you know what I mean, like that's going to come, you know what I mean. So that I just feel like that things are moving more in favor of Anatomy of a Fall, which is totally fine because it is an excellent screenplay, a very layered screenplay. And in dealing with complex, again, perspectives, like like dealing, like really interrogating the truth and the nuances of human behavior and what we should believe by what we're seeing and by what evidence we're given. And it really complicates that gray zone. And so, in terms of a writing feat, it's really impressive as well. So I see that being the winner here, even though my personal choice would be Past Lives,
And
since it won't win anywhere else.
I also think that it's a good time to maybe compliment the Oscars, which sometimes we don't always do, on the fact that we're talking about two movies that were written and directed by women in this category. And I would like to point out, I don't think that we did that. In the Best Picture, you actually have, for the first time, 3 movies that were directed by women are nominated for Best Picture in the same year. That's never happened before. Of course, it hasn't always been 10 pictures in Best Picture anyway, but I think that that's something that you're looking at here, where you're seeing an opportunity for women to make movies, but also make excellent movies and to be recognized potentially for those movies. Because I think that for both Laron and I, and probably you as well, Caleb, that this is a battle between 2 screenplays that were written by women. You have Barbie that was also co-written by women.
Right.
So you're seeing some really great storytelling by women get a chance to win Oscars.
I think it's also worth noting I believe that Celine Song is the first writer to Korean American writer to be nominated for Best Original Screenplay, which, again, not saying the nominations this year were perfect, but let's pat them on the back when they do something right, which is they really are bringing more voices to the table, worthy voices at that. I'm going to break a little bit. I love Past Lives. It was in my top 5. So was Anatomy of a Fall. And for that film in particular, Past Lives, there's so much emotionality. It's a great script. A lot of it's on the performances. There's a lot unsaid that I feel like is what, for me personally, is what resonates the most. That said, Anatomy of a Fall, I feel like Laron, you kind of laid it out. It's dealing with really big, complex ideas, the complexity of the truth, the complexity of relationships and how they evolve and sometimes deteriorate, the justice system. There's a lot of things, a lot of layers to it that I think makes it a little more complex. And for me, in this case, I'm going to go for a will win and should win Anatomy of a Fall. However, love Celine Song, love Past Lives. Can't wait to see what she does next. All right, let's move on to our next category, Best Cinematography. And the nominees are El Conde from Edward Lockman, Killers of the Flower Moon from Rodrigo Prieto, Maestro from Matthew Libatique, Oppenheimer from Hoyt van Hoytma, and Poor Things from Robbie Ryan. LeBron Chapman, what is your pick here?
I just feel like this is definitely an Oppenheimer, part of the Oppenheimer sweep. I have it as my should and will win in this category. But I do think it's strange, to have Rodrigo Prieto here in this category, not nominated for Barbie, but also having made, Barbie, and to have made 2 exceptionally well-made movies this year, and him not be in the winning conversation is a little strange, but it just feels like it's definitely going to be an Oppenheimer victor here. So
it takes a true wizard to make Cillian Murphy's face look so gaunting and full IMAX 3-story tall screen. That's pretty impressive, right?
Yeah.
Brandy, how about you?
Well, I would truly love to see Killers of the Flower Moon win, and I would love to see, as you noted, Laron, Rodrigo win, because can you imagine if you made 2 films as a cinematographer as good as Killers of the Flower Moon and Barbie, they were released in the same year, and you didn't win? Like that, it's like, what do you have to do to win one? I mean, right?
Yeah.
Apparently not compete against Oppenheimer. Really is what it sounds like. But I think that all of us here have seen, and this again may be bias showing, but I think all of us have seen Oklahoma depicted in not great ways over
Yeah.
the years. I think all of us sort of have an expertise in what that should look like. And
Looking at you, Logan, downtown OKC Casino. Anyway, continue.
I think that does an excellent job of creating all of those visuals that you want to see with this film, from really intimate bedroom scenes, really intimate courtroom scenes.
And period too. That's
In period, yes,
Yeah.
and to these really sweeping scenes of of fields and oil fields and cattle fields and all all of these types of things. I think that he's doing a lot of things exceptionally well with Killers of the Flower Moon, and really depicting, just really capturing not just the beauty of the state and the light and things like that, but also just really just excelling in all of these different types of spaces that you're storytelling in. I think that it's just an exceptional job. But at the same time, I think you can say that there's a lot of innovative storytelling going on in Oppenheimer, and in one of those categories is cinematography. So my pick would definitely be Should, Killers of the Flower Moon, Rodrigo for Barbie and Killers of the Flower Moon, because I think it's a shame that he's not nominated here for Barbie. But I think that what you will see is, I think you'll see Oppenheimer win in this category.
Maybe one of these days they'll do a best body of work category like we have in the OFCC, where it's like, hey, you did a bunch of cool stuff. And we at least, if you can't win in one of them, you should win for doing a lot of cool stuff in one year.
He was my top pick in best body of work this year.
Yes,
for
mine
OFCC.
too. Yeah.
Because how many people can say that they did such exceptional work on two such exceptional films in 1 year?
Mm-hmm. And one being the highest grossing film of the year, and the other being one of the highest reviewed films of the year. I mean, come on. What a career. I seriously thought at one point he was going to pull a Roger Deakins where he was nominated for both movies and then lose because he was competing against himself. But
what was it, like Issa Rae and is in 2 Best Picture films, American Fiction and Barbie.
Yes.
Small abbreviated roles in both of those, underutilized in both, I think, too, but she's great. And then also Sandra Hüller, Anatomy of a Fall, Zone of Interest. It's like, that's pretty cool. It's pretty cool, to be there for 2 movies. And it's like, where do I sit? It's like,
yeah, which team do I sit with at the dinners? Yeah.
I want to be in the winner's circle. Which movie's doing?
I'm gonna side with Bam on this. Biases that we live in Oklahoma, but just the way that Prito was able to capture the rolling hills, the big sweeping rolling hills, the historic towns. That I'm thinking of, like that race car scene at the beginning of the movie, or even the scene where they're burning the land and you get that close up of the flames, and just as Leo is sweating it out while he's just tried the drug. Like, there's just so many visual shots that are kinetic, and there's such a variety of the types of shots that he's doing. And it's capturing Oklahoma in a way we have not seen before, at least not at this caliber. So for me, that's a big win. I also think that, Hoyt's going to be back with the next Chris Nolan movie, almost certainly, no matter what it is.
Or Jordan Peele.
Yeah, exactly.
Because he does those.
He does those too. Man of many talents. That said, you got to give hats off to the guy who carried around that giant IMAX camera with film in it, mind you, to shoot all these close-ups. So I think Oppenheimer will win, should win Killers of the Flower Moon for me. But let's move on to our next category, shall we? It sounds pretty important, you could say. Best sound.
I see what you did there,
Wow.
or heard what you did there.
Throw the tomatoes. I deserve all of them. The nominees are, and I'm going to start reducing the number of names I read just because there's a lot of names in some of these categories. The first nominee is The Creator, Maestro, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, ? It's not Part 1 anymore, but I guess they submitted it as Part 1. Oppenheimer, or The Zone of Interest. Brandy McDonnell, what is your pick for this film?
This is an interesting category. I don't often have a lot of strong opinions about sound in films. I mean, I sometimes do, but it's rare that I have one that's this strong. I would have actually liked to have seen Killers of the Flower Moon here as well, just because I feel like, again, they captured a lot of that Oklahoma sound. It was interesting to sit there at the end of that film and hear the Oklahoma wind and the storms. And there's that pivotal scene that we had that one picture from for all that time. Yeah. When you see that scene play out, it's all about them listening to a storm.
Yeah.
They did an exceptional job of capturing some of that. Sadly, they're not among the nominees here, but I think that should win, will win for me is Zone of Interest. I really feel like it's rare that sound is so essential to the storytelling, because that whole film, and what makes it different from so many Holocaust films that we've seen, is that it's a contrast between what you see and what you hear.
Yeah.
It is the sound of gunshots and crematoriums burning and people crying and screaming, and set up against these images of this family living this very pastoral, beautiful, upper middle class lifestyle right on the other side of the wall of this concentration camp. And I feel like it really is essential. That's what they're using as the storytelling mechanism. You see very little of the actual
Crimes.
Holocaust
weren't crimes at the
horror
time.
that you're used to seeing. It's what you hear, and the ability of people to ignore that while they go about living their pretty best lives. That's really what the whole storytelling is about in the case of that film. So I really feel like you almost have to give it, because it's using sound so much as a storytelling mechanism to tell a really powerful story about how you can sort of become separated from your humanity and your sense of empathy, because it's their ability to tune out all those noises and what they mean that allows them to go about living those pretty little lives. Especially the baby, for me, that was just, you can't tell whether it's a baby or a person screaming in the concentration camp, or if it's the Nazi family's baby that's crying half the time. And it just creeped me out every time. And I just really feel like that's a should win and a will win for me in that category.
I think that's well said. That is certainly, I mean, that movie has a lot going for it, but that the sound is the part that you're going to be laying in bed thinking about at night. You know, the sound of the trains coming in, the gunshots you mentioned. It's it's a very upsetting story, and it makes you pause and think about our own role and potentially enabling other such horrible things to happen. What things are we turning a blind eye to? You know, Laron, what do you think?
No, similarly to you, because it is a different film. It's a different kind of film. It's approaching the form a lot different. And I feel like what's interesting about that movie, where also I agree with you, I'm not someone who typically emphasizes the sound or the editing of a movie particularly well, because those are things I don't do or have a great ear for, you know. But in this particular film, it's utilizing that element so prominently, and you can see how it's affecting the tone and the mood of the movie. I'd similarly say like a movie like After Sun, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, using editing in a way to tell a story a very specific way, where I was like, I never look at editing, but the way this movie is edited is conveying everything, all the information to the audience. And so sound being so integral to the success of this movie and what it's trying to accomplish just feels, like this definitely should be winning the award. That said, there still feels like there's an opportunity for another Oppenheimer sweep here. So I think should win the Zone of Interest, and I hope the Academy agrees with me. But I do think that Oppenheimer could still steal this, and I'm putting that in my tentative will win right now.
For Oppenheimer?
For Oppenheimer.
Yeah. So I tend to agree with you because I think one thing we should acknowledge that sometimes, especially when we talk about things and we boil things down to like the Academy as if it's some monolithic entity. No, it's made up of lots of voters, voters who don't see all the movies. And, while the Zone of Interest, I do think has had a lot of buzz and has probably been watched by a lot of members, it certainly hasn't been watched by as nearly as many as Oppenheimer has. So with that in mind, sound could get swept into the Oppenheimer sweep that I think we're going to see.
Yeah. And the sound is great.
The sound is great,
It's
and Oppenheimer.
Also important in that film as well. But
it's not as important and
Not
integral
as
as the Zone of Interest, which I think absolutely should win, undeniably. If that movie gets any award,
that's the one.
that's the one. Yeah. With that said, let's move on to our next category, Best Original Song. And I'm so pumped to read this list of nominees, because one of them is from the movie that I know everyone saw and believed in. That's right. From Flamin' Hot, The Fire Inside, music and lyric by Diane Warren. Did you guys know Diane Warren partners with Cheetos now?
I think, I didn't know that, but I will say that, what is this, her 14th or 15th nomination without a win? I think that until she wins
A competitive
Oscar.
Oscar, because they did give her honorary one.
Until she wins the Oscar in this category, I think you can just expect there to be a placeholder. There will always be a filmmaker who's willing to have a Diane Warren song in their film, because clearly there's been plenty of movies that this has been their only nomination, including now Flaming Hot, is to try and get the Diane Warren Oscar. And I think that if you look back on some of those 14 or 15 nominations, there are definitely some that she deserved to win.
Certainly.
I'm just not thinking,
Guys.
I'm just not saying it's The Fire Inside.
All of Us Strangers doesn't have an Oscar nomination, but Flamin' Hot does.
Yep, that is the world we live in, Laron. 2024 Oscars. Moving on to the other nominees. I'm Just Ken from Barbie, music and lyric by Mark Ronson and Andrew Wyatt. It Never Went Away from American Symphony, music and lyric by John Batiste and Dan Wilson.
Wazazi.
Thank you. A Song for My People from Killers of the Flower Moon, music and lyric by Scott George, and What Was I Made For from Barbie, music and lyric by Billie Eilish and Phineas O'Connell. What a category. LeBron Chapman, start us off. Who's going to win?
I have to start by saying that the fact that Wazazi is here is very important and significant. And my husband made, a wager with me that wouldn't happen. And, I made a wager with him that wouldn't happen, and it did happen. And so I was so happy, more than all the snubs and everything that happened on Oscar nominations morning, to tell him that you were right about Wazazi getting in there and how exciting it is. And with it being, an Osage Nation, person who made that song, it would be so exciting, to see something like that, a win for that particular one. That said, it's definitely going to a Barbie, a Barbie song.
The wrong one. One could argue.
Not me.
Dua Lipa would argue it. Dua Lipa would say
Dua
so.
Lipa. I saw your ranking of the 3 Barbie songs, Caleb, on Facebook. It's fine. It's fine. I really think that even though Billie Eilish, who I'm a huge fan of, I think she's a prodigy of a musician to be her age and as talented as she is, already has an Oscar, doesn't necessarily need another one. But if we're going to give it to a Barbie song, I personally am going the route of this one, What Was I Made For, because I really do think it encapsulates the theme of the entire movie lyrically and tonally. And it's kind of, the emotional beat of it. It comes at a really particular pivotal moment for that character in the story. And I think if you listen to it, you could hear and know kind of, thematically and emotionally what this movie was about. Whereas I feel like its competitor, I'm Just Ken, is an excellent, fun, kind of a one-off song for that particular character.
Top of the charts, Laron.
Is only its own thing. That's fair. It is. So my personal choice would be What Was I Made For? And I think it also will win because of the pedigree of that musician and the song did great. It did win a Grammy just a couple weeks ago. So
keep the momentum going. You made a great case, Laron, but Brandy, bring some reason to this conversation.
I don't know that there's reason that I'm bringing to it necessarily. I'm mostly just bringing a sense of giddy excitement to the fact that you have Scott George, an Osage Nation citizen who lives in Del City, who works a day job as the director of housing for the Citizen Potawatomi Nation, even though he's Osage, is nominated for an Oscar. There's just something about that makes me so happy, like in my heart. He's the first Indigenous person that's ever been nominated in this category. He's the first Osage person who's ever nominated for an Oscar. So, if you take all of that partnership and that allyship that was done with Killers of the Flower Moon to tell this story by involving and incorporating as many Osage people as possible, one of them got an Oscar nomination, guys.
It's incredible.
So that's pretty great.
Yeah.
And just the notion, since I don't think the Academy is going to turn down the chance to have Ryan Gosling sing I'm Just Ken
Right.
or Billie Eilish perform.
Yeah.
And I don't think that they're going to have be silly enough. I hope they're not going to be silly enough to let those people perform and leave the others out.
Yeah.
the idea that we will have this song performed by largely Osage people from Oklahoma singing and playing drum on the Oscars, I get chills just thinking about that. Whenever you think just a few years
And
back.
that's what representation does. You
Yeah,
know,
real.
bringing them into the fold.
Exactly.
You put them on a platform. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, just think a few years ago, I mean, tons of Native people were just giddy because West Studi, Oklahoma's own West Studi, spoke in Cherokee during a presentation of an Oscar or an Oscar montage. So, I mean, just a few words spoken just 5 or 6 years ago versus an entire song written by a person who learned it, learned his native language, his people's language through playing songs at powwows from the time he was a child. That to me is fantastic. This, Diane Warren notwithstanding, I don't want to pick on Diane Warren too much because I do think that there are some songs that she's done that should have won Oscars. But, I mean, just think this whole category is pretty great. I mean, as far as that goes. I mean, I think John Baptiste, I mean, that man never puts on a bad show from what I can tell.
No.
And I mean, and he did not get, as I'm sure we'll talk about later, that he did not get a nomination in the documentary category
Sadly.
for American Symphony. But this was a great song.
Yeah.
And he'll put on a beautiful performance, and it's great representation again.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Billie Eilish's song, I think that is what is going to win. I'm not going to say that it shouldn't. I feel like it's one of those things that it should win. It comes at a very pivotal part of that film. I think should win should be, Scott George and, the song for his people, the Osage Nation. That's the one I would love to see win. I don't think it will, but I think it's going to be a beautiful moment for it to be there. And who doesn't love I'm Just Ken? Who doesn't love Ryan Gosling?
It's great.
Do his Ryan Gosling thing is going to be fantastic. I think that who will win, though, is Billie Eilish, and I'm not mad about it. I think that's a beautiful performance and a great song.
Well, I seem to have lost the argument. I am really excited that we'll get to see some Indigenous representation at the stage. I don't want to assume because they haven't announced it yet, but it would be shocking, like seriously shocking, if we don't get the Osage performance at the Academy. Listen, guys, I actually had 2 different songs from the Barbie soundtrack play at my wedding reception, and neither of them was What Was I Made For? So,
I was at your wedding reception, and it would not have fit the narrative. So, to
Very
be
fair.
It's a different.
It's like him just by himself saying, "Why did I get here? Why is this?"
We're gonna stop the evening and say, "What was I made for?" Yeah.
You were made to be married to that woman. So,
thank you. I agree. Thank you.
It's not a party song. I'll give you that.
So therefore, my bias is I'm Just Ken, which this is super fun. Gosling goes for it. It's innovative. It's not the type of thing that you would see win this type of award. I think it's super fun. That said, Billie Eilish has been cleaning up every award show in the book, so it's definitely going to What Was I Made For is definitely the winner. I would be surprised. I'll bet a pizza on it. Anyone want to bet a pizza on it?
Yeah, I'll do a pizza on it.
Well, we're betting on,
for it though, right?
Yeah, we're on the same side. That's the
then
problem.
I think we're all going to end up splitting that pizza.
That's fine.
And the
Still
cost.
just buy it as a pizza, Caleb. It's fine.
All right. Well, let's move on to our next category. Best Original Score, where the nominees are American Fiction by Laura Cartman, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny by John Williams, Killers of the Flower Moon by Robbie Robertson, Oppenheimer by Ludwig Göransson, and Poor Things by Jerskin Fendrix. Bam, what is your pick here?
This is an interesting category. I find myself being fascinated by this category because I loved American Fiction. I thought that film was hilarious and I adored it. But I don't remember the score at all.
It's not
like
a standout.
It's not the thing that ever to me stands out about that film.
And I've since gone back and listened to it. Like maybe I missed something. I heard it and I'm like, it's very generic. So I don't understand that at all.
And I don't necessarily think that the Indiana Jones is just the greatest hits. I think he wrote some, very nice, sort of new pieces to go with the new characters that are in that film. But, essentially it's John Williams doing the John Williams thing. That he does so better than anyone else. I mean, he's been nominated more than anybody else. I mean, he does it better than anyone else. I'm fascinated by the fact that this is the first time an Indigenous person has been nominated for Best Score with Robbie Robertson. I was really surprised. First of all, I was surprised he'd never been nominated before. How's
Right.
the man
Yeah,
done
they
12? How's the man done
Yeah.
12 movies with Scorsese and never been nominated for Best Score?
Right.
I mean, that sort of blows my mind. And then I think that Ludwig Göransson always does good work. I mean, he always does great work. I think it will really come down to those two. I think that the voting will be very interesting. I personally am I favor Killers of the Flower Moon, and that's totally biased on my part because I feel like they're both excellent scores. I do think that the voting is going to be very interesting with Robbie Robertson having passed away.
It being a posthumous award.
I mean, it
too.
being a posthumous award, particularly for somebody who I think a lot of people are going to say he was never nominated before, and you can think of the ones that he should have been nominated for, and now he'll never be nominated again. I think that there's a pretty good chance that this could be captured by Killers of the Flower Moon, but I still think it's more likely to go as part of an Oppenheimer sweep.
LaRon?
She's taking all the words from us, so
Yes.
it's absolutely how I feel. I feel the only way it would tip in his favor again with it, and I wouldn't call it a sympathy vote, though, no more than I would call Heath Ledger's, or Chadwick Boseman, who was expected to win that year. Like these people, they're in the categories because they deserve to be in the categories, but I think that it could weigh in someone's decision making. That I have an opportunity to do this. This person doesn't need it. This person will never get it. You know what I mean? So I could see that wrestling in voters' minds. And I kind of, in a weird way, hope it does. I hope it does. I personally think that Oppenheimer will win in this category because it is a great score. And, and it is very prominent in the movie. But it would be nice to see. So I'd say should win. Should win, should be Killers, and will win Oppenheimer.
Yeah. Again, not to repeat myself too much, but there were other films that I would have picked for number one here. Had they been nominated, I really thought Daniel Pipperton's score from Across the Spider-Verse is pretty spectacular. No
It's
pun
a
intended.
really great score.
Yes. And the lack of nomination here is pretty upsetting. But with the omission of two of my favorite scores from the year being here, I tend to lean towards should win Killers. Robbie Robertson, last chance. This is, he passed away. I think so. Even if I perhaps prefer Oppenheimer's score, personally, I think you got to honor the guy who has put in great work for decades. That said, Oppenheimer sweep. I think Oppenheimer's got this in the bag. I'd be very surprised if anything but Oppenheimer won here. All right, let's move on to our next category, Best Film Editing. And the nominees are Anatomy of a Fall, The Holdovers, Killers of the Flower Moon, Oppenheimer, or Poor Things. Laron Chapman, what is your pick here?
I feel like this is neck and neck. I think Killers and Oppenheimer are neck and neck here. And I think that seems to be the case in a lot of the tech categories here. I think to take two weighty movies, that are exceeding 3 hours long, and make those movies flow and never get stodgy or boring, is an incredible feat, because I dread it seeing both of these movies to a certain extent, just for that. Like, okay, I'm going to have to sit through a 3.5 hour movie. We had this conversation, all three of us did actually have this conversation about Killers, and it coast by. You're really invested, and I think that's a testament to how these scenes are shot and pieced together, and how they choose to construct these. And so, really, either of them deserve this. So, but I think Oppenheimer's gonna win here. I'd be happy to see. I think I'm gonna keep putting Killers in my should, because I really think if Lily Gladstone isn't a victor of the evening, that it might not walk away with much, if anything.
I think if Lily doesn't get it, I think this is going to be an Irishman year where he goes home.
Shut out from everything.
Tons of nominations, no wins.
Throw some bones here in the text. If it's neck and neck, then flip a coin. So. But I say should Killers and will Oppenheimer.
All right, Brandy.
Well, I feel the same way. I feel like the should is Killers of the Flower Moon, and that is deeply personal for me, maybe in the way that other categories aren't, because I've had to write about the Reign of Terror so many times before. And I'm surprised you can tell it in 3.5 hours of a movie, because it really is a very sweeping story. I mean, there's a lot of things that they could have gotten bogged down in and sort of like telling about some of the injustices that were involved and things like that. So I thought they did a really good job of just telling the story in a way that was very impactful, that did highlight the injustice of it and did sort of make clear, that what was going on because Osage people were viewed as not worthy of the wealth that they had because they were just stupid Indians. And so I really feel like that they did just an exceptional job telling the story. I think Oppenheimer will win because it's a flashier
Bingo. Yeah.
editing job. I mean, it just is. And so I really feel like you're going to see that film win in that category because the editing is just a flashier thing.
It uses the montages, unlike any Christopher Nolan. One of his great magic tricks is the montage, and you do get some of that in Killers, but not like you get it in Oppenheimer. I think especially during the courtroom sequence in Killers of the Flower Moon in particular, just crazy impressive editing. You're cutting back to the things that we saw in the first 3 hours and making it make sense without really pulling you out of the story. Yeah, I'll echo the sentiment. I would love to see Thelma Shoemaker make a win here for Killers of the Flower Moon, but I don't think anything's going to beat Oppenheimer in editing, unfortunately. Simply because it's very flashy and it's just easier to go. I'll tell you, the Academy, just like they're humans, just like the rest of us. What's flashier? Well, that's super cool. So we're going to give our vote that way. Let's move on to Best Costume Design. The nominees are Barbie, Killers of the Flower Moon, Napoleon, Oppenheimer, or Poor Things. Now, this is where we're going to get in the interesting conversation, I think, of Barbie versus Killers versus Poor Things in a few of these categories. So I'll start with you, Brandy. What is going to win Best Costume Design?
Oh, man. I think this is actually a tougher category than it could be in past years in some ways. I think that there will be a lot of support for Jacqueline West and how closely she worked with the Osage Nation to create costumes that were accurate for the time period. I know talking to a lot of Osage people at the beginning of the making of this film is the concern that there's going to be a lot of regalia in it that doesn't fit that time period and things like that. Just the concern that they're going to be made to quote unquote look Indian whenever that wouldn't have been what they were wearing at the time period, kind of, so to speak. And so I think that I can see a lot of support, and I think she did an exceptional job of making sure that everything was both in period, but it also incorporated aspects of the Osage culture in it in a way that that was very respectful, but also very accurate to the period. And so I think that she did an exceptional job. I would like to see it given to her, but I really feel like this is one of those things where you might see Barbie win because there's so much that is done with those costumes throughout. And you have to. I mean, that was one of those things that if the costumes don't work in Barbie, then Barbie doesn't work.
Right.
And so I really feel like maybe should win. Maybe that's a little strong. I would like to see Killers of the Flower Moon win here, but I also think that Barbie will, and I'm not necessarily mad about it. But then I also haven't seen Poor Things.
I think that's well said. I mean, Weird Barbie, come on. All the different Ken outfits. I mean, you name it. Costumes, like iconic costumes, just like left and right. Laron Chapman.
Well, speaking of Weird Barbie, Bella Baxter, Emma Stone, I feel like this category, we're getting into the Poor Things versus Barbie in the next couple of categories here. I feel like you said, it doesn't work. Barbie doesn't work without the costumes that it has. I just personally feel like when pitting the two movies together and seeing it, I feel like the Poor Things world that's created in the gowns that she's wearing and all of them, it's a period piece, but not exactly, you know what I mean? Not just straightforward. There's some invention here. It's definitely kind of futuristic. It's not of a certain time. It's old fashioned, but also has some futuristic aspects to it. I feel like, and it's also more ornate to me than Barbie. And that's just by design, because Barbie has a very particular aesthetic, and that universe has a very particular aesthetic. And I think they did nail that. But personally, I favor Poor Things in the should category here, and then I do think that Barbie will win, and I wouldn't be mad about it because it was very well done.
All right, this is a tough one. I am leaning towards Killers of the Flower Moon should win, but also I could go for Barbie. But also, I think Poor Things is going to win. I think that Barbie's the flashiest of the bunch. I think the job they had with Killers of the Flower Moon, I think, was the most complex in terms of being historically accurate, the amount of work they had to put into it. But I also think Poor Things is the Academy catnip, especially in these production design, costuming.
Yeah,
it's got that Britishness to it that they tend to like. So I think should win. I'm going to go Killers of the Flower Moon. Could win, and I wouldn't be mad about it, Barbie. What I'm confident will win, moderately confident will win, is Poor Things, though. But hey, it's a race. I do think it's a race in this category.
Yeah,
which
like you said, and typically in this category, there's normally a surefire thing, so.
Well, that will take us to our next category, which is Best International Feature Film. Oh, goodness. Caleb's going to mispronounce the first one.
El Capitano.
El Capitano. There we go. Thank you, Laron. From Italy. Perfect Days from Japan. Society of the Snow from Spain. The Teacher's Lounge from Germany. And The Zone of Interest from the United Kingdom. Laron Chapman.
Man, Anatomy of a Fall should be here.
For real.
But, it's not. And The Zone of Interest is a perfectly adequate movie to take this award. But if I'm looking at what is here and selected, I'm more emotionally connected to the Society of the Snow. We talked about that on a previous podcast, and it's just a much better version of a already good and established film, told properly and with the right people involved. Ethan Hawke not playing a Chilean actor, it's very strange. But I just thought that was such a sweeping and gripping and very viscerally exciting international film that I don't think many people unfortunately have not seen. It came out pretty late, and The Zone of Interest has had it's also nominated in Best Picture. It just shows you that there's a lot of love for this particular film, and I think that it will take the award. But I think should win in this category is Society of Snow.
All right, Brandy.
I think Zone of Interest pretty much has this locked up. I think that absent of Anatomy of a Fall, none of the rest of these are going to grab people enough to take it away from the Zone of Interest. I just don't think that they are. Which, by the way, I really, I can't say enjoyed the Zone of Interest. But I did appreciate that film. I did like that film because it wasn't what I expected it to be.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I think it goes beyond being a Holocaust film. And I think that it does, I think it's a great film for our times that we live in of failing to recognize the humanity of other people is pretty easy to do in this day and age. And so I really feel like it captures that zeitgeist well. And I think that it's a particularly well-made film. And so I do think that it deserves to win and it will win.
And it convicts us, which I really love about it. It kind of, it's one of those movies where, it's about the Holocaust, but it also isn't. You know what I mean? It also is it's more broad in terms
of the human condition.
Yeah, exactly. And in what ways are we...
It's like,
ignoring the atrocities that are over the fence over here that aren't our issues to deal with or acknowledge, and going about our day-to-day not acknowledging that this is happening to these people and these are happening, and we're not saying anything, how complicit we are in that. So I think it is definitely, without waving its finger, convicting us of those same kinds of that same kind of apathy towards others, the plight of others. And I think that's one of the ways that it's very effective.
Well, I think it's interesting that it's out the same year as Killers of the Flower Moon.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's very easy to sort of look at that and say, wow, this is a group of people who just are blind to what's happening, willfully blind to what's happening over there, so that they can build a great life for themselves.
Yeah.
And you sort of see
At the expense of other people.
At the expense of other people. And so I think you see that very much as being, there's definitely some themes that I think that Scorsese did a good job of bringing to the fore of Killers of the Flower Moon that are very similar to, if you've seen Zone of Interest, that scene with the fur coat, how is that any different from so much of what goes down in Killers of the Flower Moon?
Well, and it just goes to show you that it's not like, it's easy to picture evil was so far away. Oh, Nazi Germany was so long ago. Oh, Killers of the Flower Moon was 100 years ago. We've progressed as a society. No, it's really easy. You can have people in your backyard who are suffering, and you're just turning a blind eye to it, and you're profiting off of it. And it's a challenging film. I really admire the hell out of it. I respect the hell out of it. I think it actually has really powerful utility, specifically for these types of conversations that we have on this podcast, but also just in terms of like academia, in terms of really diving into that subject matter. That said, I think my pick for should win would also be Society of the Snow. I just think it's more palpable. I will almost certainly go back and rewatch that film, not regularly, but I'll watch it again. And I can also imagine several scenarios where I recommend the film as a sort of a survivalist. I would recommend The Zone of Interest
to a certain
type of person with a very specific set of parameters for how you should approach watching it. But I do think Zone of Interest will win. Society of the Snow, for my pick, should win. That said, really not going to be mad about Zone of Interest winning either.
Yeah.
Let's move on to Best Makeup and Hairstyling. And the nominees are Golda, Maestro, Oppenheimer, Poor Things, and Society of the Snow. Bam, what are your picks?
What a weird category.
Right.
I mean, it's just weird, right? I'm not the only one who's looking at this going, wow, it's like they took every kind of makeup that you can do and just shoved it into one category and went, yeah, you guys figure it out. So you have Golda and Maestro, which are very much about prosthetics and trying to recreate the look of a well-known historic person. And then you have Poor Things, which, again, I have not seen. I have seen what it looks like, and I think that makeup and hair are arguably very essential to the telling of that story. Oppenheimer kind of gets in there on the whole, like, historic period kind of thing, which I think you could have easily seen Killers of the Flower Moon in here as well. And I think that you would have been very justified in having them in there. And then I have not seen Society of the Snow, so it's hard for me to say.
Lots of cold, like
decaying
skin and frozen lips, and so a lot of kind of disaster.
more graphic, without being overly flashy, but kind of a little more graphic survivalist.
It just was released so late that I didn't catch. Is one I didn't catch.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it didn't actually release
it's on Netflix,
to anyone until Netflix in January.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that will be a definite disadvantage to that. I don't think enough people have seen that or Golda to really care.
I don't think anyone saw Golda.
No.
Oh, I mean,
I love Helen Mirren, but
as Golda,
it's a choice.
That's a choice that you could make, obviously. Whether or not I would make it is a whole different story. I think that you're going to see sort of an Oppenheimer versus Poor Things kind of category here, essentially. I don't think that Maestro, especially with some of the controversy over the makeup, you're going to see them be able to sort of capture anybody's imagination here. So I think it's going to come down to Oppenheimer versus Poor Things, and not having seen Poor Things, I guess I'll say Oppenheimer.
All right, so that's your could win, should win?
I guess.
Oppenheimer?
Sure.
Laron Chapman?
My should win is Poor Things here. I think it was very impressive and very otherworldly, and nuanced in a way. And it's weird to say that because it is kind of grotesque, but you get used to the grotesqueness of the film and the different weird kind of kooky characters that come into it, and you take them seriously and don't see them as creatures, which I thought was really interesting. So that would be my choice for should win here. And I actually disagree. I think Maestro is the category I think it's going to take. This is the one that I think it's going to get, and I think it's because of that de-aging. Where the
old age makeup,
the very subtle aging of it. It's something they love to do, and it's one of the things I've heard the most, more than the performances. I've heard that the makeup is fantastic in it, and that the older Carey Mulligan it sells well, and then that Bernstein, it's done well, and I think that I'm not as impressed by that as I am in some of the others in this category, but the narrative all year has been that Maestro is probably going to take this award, and so I tend to agree. So
Even with all the controversy over the Jewish nose.
I think that was controversy before people actually saw the movie, though. I think once people saw the movie, I really didn't see as much controversy about that. But maybe I'm also not looking in those places online.
It's also true. It's very valid. I've only heard of passing controversy, passing knowledge of that controversy, but that it's definitely something to consider. Sure.
I also tend to agree that I think Maestro is going to win because of the old age makeup. It's not my pick. I'm honestly, I would probably go Oppenheimer. So here's the thing about Oppenheimer. It has a cool story, which is, and I think this is probably they've been using it on the campaign, which is, that scene at the end of the movie where they have basically the entire cast in the one room where he gets the medal at the old age. Well, they put everyone in old age makeup. Everyone who was there. It's not like they had certain actors and they cut away. No, if they were in that room and they were a prominent character anywhere in the movie, they got the old age makeup and they talked about how crazy it was, how they had to do it on a schedule, and how Chris Nolan was insistent that everyone had it. Anyway, the story, I think, gives it a leg up in terms of could win. I would say should win because I thought the makeup was pretty good. Nothing to go home about, but I thought it overall looked pretty solid. I liked it better than the way Maestro makeup looked, but I do think Maestro, the old age, is very, in terms of makeup, very flashy.
Yeah, and it's integral to the story too.
Yes.
So they're covering a large swath of time, but yeah, it's not an exciting win.
No,
but I feel like I do feel like it will.
That's the one thing it's going to win. Maybe. Let's move on to Best Production Design, where the nominees are Barbie, Killers of the Flower Moon, Napoleon, Oppenheimer, and Poor Things. Laron, Chapman, who's winning Best Production Design?
Barbie and Barbie and Barbie. So if you don't give this to Barbie, then it's a travesty, really. I think Poor Things production design is very impressive, maybe just as much, but I think the narrative around this movie, even before we saw a Margot Robbie performance or whatever, was like, look at the world they're creating. Really getting exciting about the aesthetic, getting excited about the Barbie dream house. Like, how is it going to look? How are they going to interpret this and make it realistic enough for us to buy into it? And then I think that everybody was kind of blown away by that. So I think that it is impressive. And so I feel like this absolutely deserves to win, and I think it will as well.
You think it's got it in the bag? Mm-hmm. All right. Brandy?
I think that that's correct. I think that any other year, just think about that spanking scene in Killers of the Flower Moon. I think that production design alone, some of the production design in that film is incredible.
Yeah.
I think of that scene, but I also think of like the courthouse scene that you were talking about and some of those types of things. I think that's fantastic. I think if there were any other year that you would have a shot with that of just being able to create these images and these places out that are so out of, it's sort of like Oppenheimer in this category in terms of taking what you expect from that sort of historical epic and completely changing up the look at it in certain points. I really feel like any other year this would be Killers of the Flower Moons to lose, but I feel like it's Barbie. I feel like it's got to be Barbie's in this sort of year. I think you're going up against Barbie, which is all about production design. It's about creating this whole. You're not inviting people into a world. You're having to create a literal Barbie land, and I feel like that's
from
just,
what
from imagination.
Imagination, looking at the toy and saying, how do we scale this to life form and make a world out of it?
Well, and you're having to compete against. You remember, it's a largely female audience, although it certainly got a great, subsection of men who went to see that movie. But it's a female audience. You're having to compete against every little girl's imagination of what Barbie was in their head, and you pull it off. I think you deserve an Oscar.
Yeah.
I think you're gonna win one. I think you should win one.
Yeah.
So tip of the pink hat to Barbie.
I'm gonna break here.
Whoa.
Well, should win, no question. Undoubtedly Barbie. Come on, boldness, bold swings, imagination, toys to life, theme park for your set design, and a really just stunning one at that. Come on.
Yeah.
No question. And even I'm thinking about like the montage where they go to the real world and you see all the different sets they had. Just wildly imaginative.
And they're sets. They're moving.
Right?
They're real pieces
Not
of
CG.
art,
It's incredible. However, so that's my pick for should win. Just want to make it explicitly clear. That's got my vote. I hope it wins. I hope I'm wrong. However, Poor Things also has crazy impressive production design. And I was talking about this with friend of the show, Zachary Burns, earlier today. And there's something about Poor Things. Notice it swept the BAFTAs.
Mm-hmm.
There's something about it that makes you think this is a more highbrow or important film. I'm not saying I think this. I'm just saying the perception I think in the Academy is it feels a lot more in line with what the Academy would typically vote for in terms of a huge blockbuster movie.
Yeah.
Now, Barbie's kind of a unique one, but I think in this case, because Poor Things is similarly going big, bold, and imaginative, much like Barbie, they're competing head to head.
We created a whole universe, a whole
You made a huge
world.
steampunk world. By the way, the source material, it's not steampunk. Like, crazy. World building, crazy imaginative detail, the title cards for the different chapters. I just think that there's a good possibility that the Academy is going to see that and be like, yes, these are both beautiful and fantastic, but Poor Things meant something a little more important. That's my hunch. So I'm going to say...
That's how they feel. That's how they feel.
That's how they feel. Yeah. Yes. I'm going to be very clear. I do not think these things. I think the Academy voter sits down to vote. I feel like that's where their head could go. Hope I'm wrong.
I feel like it's a fleeting possibility. I just think, I don't know.
Hope I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I might be wrong. Maybe I am. I'm probably wrong. But that would put me at will win, Poor Things should win, Barbie. I want to make it explicitly clear.
Yeah.
Of all the awards in this show, I think Barbie should win production design. So more than like almost any other category. But let's move on to Best Animated Feature, where the nominees are The Boy and the Heron, Elemental, Nimona, Robot Dreams, and Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Brandy McDonnell, who is going to win Best Animated Feature Film?
I love this category, right? It's always one of my favorites.
Likewise.
That being said, I am actually, I'm surprised that for me anyway, it wasn't a bigger contest. Because I did love The Boy and the Heron, but to me, it's not my favorite Miyazaki. It does not crack the top 5. I mean, it is a great film. But you have to sort of he came out of retirement and all of these things, and to me, it's just you know what? It's not top shelf Miyazaki for me. I love the film, but I don't love it as much as I love a lot of his other work. So for me, that was how I felt about The Boy and the Heron. To me, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, I had crazy high expectations for this film, and they managed to blast through every single one of them. So I definitely think that Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse should win. I also think that it will win.
Yeah. It just took home a bunch of Annie Awards the other night, by the way. So it's definitely got the momentum at the awards.
Well, Boy and the Heron did win the BAFTA.
That's true.
And so I do think that that was a big win for them and a good win for The Boy and the Heron. And again, it's not a slam on it at all. I thought it was a brilliant film, and it was great to see a Miyazaki film after not having seen a new one in a while, but it just didn't, to me, capture quite that level of magic when he's working at the top of his game.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a very fair assessment of the film. I don't agree, but I think it's a fair one. And I think that the odds are against it in this specific race. Laron Chapman?
Now, has Miyazaki ever won an Oscar?
Yeah, Spirited Away.
Okay.
Yes.
I was going to say, if he hadn't, then I'd be putting a little bit more attention there. I think it would be a more exciting win for sure. But I do think that I do feel like even at this particular moment, I think that Spider-Man still has been the narrative again all year too. And I feel like that could change. It could change. Maybe last minute the grassroots effort for The Boy and the Heron could change the conversation. But I think that Spider-Man will take this. One of the reasons I would like to see The Boy and the Heron take it instead of Spider-Man is it has an Oscar, the first film did get one. So a second one isn't as exciting, whereas
Right.
like a win for an anime film this late in late life, career of a master in this particular category would be much more significant, than a second Spider-Man win. That being said, I love the hell out of Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, and all my fatigue for any kind of franchise, Marvel, what have you, like went away when I saw that movie. You know what I mean? Like it completely invigorated why I liked these kinds of movies and animation, and so it's definitely not an undeserving win. But I do think it will win. But I would be more excited to see A Boy and the Heron win.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Laron. So firstly, the other thing I want to call out about The Boy and the Heron that makes it really stand out for me is I agree it might not be Miyazaki's best, but I do think it's one that I haven't been able to stop thinking about since I saw it. There's a lot of big ideas he's putting out there. As a whole package, it's not Princess Mononoke, it's not Spirited Away, but for me, in some ways, it's saying things a little more profound that I'll be thinking about probably until the day I'm dead, because it's about things a person thinks about at the end of his life. That said, the thing that really sticks out to me beyond all that, where it lacks in like cohesive story, hand-drawn animation. I mean, they spent how many years drawing this? They brought in some of the top animators from all of Japan to come work on this thing, and it was just a crazy impressive collaboration. Miyazaki is at the top, but he was able to bring in like a lot of his former proteges who've all gone and worked at various aspects of the anime and animation industry. And I just thought you just don't see animation like that. That a studio would allow their animators to spend that much time and money hand drawing things. We just don't do it that way anymore. And so this might be one of the last great hand drawn animated films we get ever.
Yeah.
So for me, that's where I land on The Boy and the Heron is my pick. However, yeah, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse was incredible. It was in my top 10. It blew my socks off. The animation, it's crazy innovative. There's like, probably 12 different animation styles, oftentimes stacked on top of one another. They have different animated characters in the same scene with different frame rates.
And you don't
Wild.
get confused by
Nope.
it. Like, it doesn't feel messy and disjointed. It does still feel very like, where everything's at.
Right.
Which is, it's very impressive,
It's crazy impressive. So I think it will win. I think it's got the momentum. I'm not going to be heartbroken about it at all. I think it's a magnificent film. And I think, there was a good decade where it felt like, okay, we're just going to give everything to Pixar or Disney animated. And frankly, I don't think while on a storytelling level, there were some years there were some pretty standout films. From an animation perspective, I really don't think they were innovating all that much. So to have two films that I think are really raising and pushing the bar forward to be in this category, where if either film wins, we all win. Like, I think it's just a testament to how powerful each of those are in their own respective ways. So I think my pick would be should win Boy and the Heron, will win Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse.
And R.I.P. TNT.
Yeah, right.
Mutant Mayhem, which I think should be here over
do
some others.
Yeah,
but it's fine. It's fine. It wouldn't have
yeah.
won, but it would have been nice to see.
I would definitely put it in over Nimona or Robot Dreams personally.
Yeah.
But, I like both of those fine. They're both fine. Let's move on to Best Visual Effects. And the nominees are The Creator, the Oscar-nominated The Creator, twice Oscar-nominated The Creator, Godzilla Minus One, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, and Napoleon. Laron Chapman, who's got the gold?
Man, the fact that Godzilla Minus One squeaked in here so late in the game, and it just shows me that there is a wealth of support for that particular one. And me not being like a super big, tell me the words, kaiju. I've seen these and I appreciate them, but that one pretty much blew me away when I saw it, and I saw it very late. I succumbed to all of the,
You finally caved to all the pressure.
Everybody was like, "You got to see it, you got to see it." And I was like, "It's Godzilla. I know it looks great. I've seen Godzilla movies. They all look great." It's like, but it looks great, and for what it was made for,
It's like $15 million.
it's a feat, in terms of visual effects. And so I really do think there's a grassroots efforts for that to win. I can feel the outside love and support for that one. So I do think that one should win, and I think it also will win.
All right. will win, should win, -1. Brandy,
I would love to see Godzilla Minus One live.
let's
win.
go.
I would love it. I would love it. That movie made me cry. I was
Yes.
like, who had on their bingo card that a Godzilla movie would make you cry in
Right?
2023 or 2024? Actually, it's on 2024.
It came out of nowhere.
Came out of nowhere. Yeah, nowhere. But yes, I would love to see Godzilla Minus One win this category, and I'm hopeful that it can get there. Mostly because I don't think this is a particularly strong category.
No.
I mean, it's not a particularly strong category. And am I the only one that's kind of surprised to not see Oppenheimer in here? It's in everything else.
It's a bizarre omission. I'm very confused by that because maybe it didn't use a lot of CG, but I mean, we saw the sequences where they're doing all sorts of cool things with the bomb and the atoms.
I think it's because Nolan, and I don't know, but Nolan very explicitly said multiple times, we used all practical effects and everything. This whole sequence was done. And I think that him trying to steer away from it being digital, you know what I mean? Like they just fed into it, but it's there.
The practical effects are still visual effects.
Exactly.
It's like, I don't understand that.
And
It's
I
like-
think whenever you think back on Oppenheimer, some of those key visual effects images are the images that stand out for a lot of people. So I'm really surprised that it's not in here. And I think that since it isn't a category that I think is necessarily going to, like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, I don't think they did anything that was any different than
It's
what
a Marvel
they've done
movie.
on any of those movies or any Marvel movie, really. I mean, I think Mission Impossible 2, I mean, it almost runs into the same problem as Oppenheimer. It's like, that's a lot of practical effects as well. I mean, so I feel like just absent that, I think that Godzilla Minus One should win, and I'm very, very hopeful that it will win. Fingers crossed. Rooting for the kaiju.
Yeah.
I'm on the same page as you guys. I mean, Godzilla Minus One, also in my top 10. I seriously didn't expect that movie. And even when I heard it was good, I was like, okay, it'll be a good Godzilla movie. The Japanese Godzilla movies, even the good ones, tend to be pretty good. This one was great.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the visual effects, this movie was a $15 million budgeted movie. It's competing with the Guardians of the Galaxy movie that was at least $200 million. Mission Impossible, one of the most expensive movies ever made. Napoleon, $200 million movie.
Yeah.
And
They did the
Godzilla
most
Minus
with the
One.
least.
Absolutely. So for my money, I feel like that should be a clear indicator. Now, I do want to give a tip of the hat to the creator. Didn't really like that movie that much. But, they made that movie for like 40 or 50 million, and it looked better
looks
than,
good. It looks good. It's just,
looks like a 200
stories
million.
kind of.
Yeah, the movie's not that great, though. Not. So Godzilla Minus One should win. Fairly confident will win because of all the grassroots moments. Did you guys see the reaction in Japan when they found out that they got nominated?
They just
And you guys, since you guys didn't watch it live, I did watch the nominations live, and even the room where they were announcing the nominations, like everybody went woo, everybody cheered.
Yeah,
Love
I
it.
didn't expect it to
in
happen.
that room. So, and that's not the room that's necessarily the home court.
This
for
is
that.
general people.
You
Yeah,
know, so
I'm proud supporter of Godzilla Minus One. Let's go. And let's move on to Best Documentary Feature. Now, listeners, we have a confession to make collectively, all three of us. There are 5 nominees here. I can say I watched 5 documentaries last year. I can also say that none of them are the 5 nominated. So, Laron, Brandy, and myself, we did not see these movies.
and I think that's a testament to how like just odd the category. I mean, like the category this year is, I seriously doubt we are not Academy voters, but I seriously doubt that there are that many Academy voters that necessarily had a very different reaction than we did. It's like, I saw documentaries and none of them were these.
yeah.
I mean, so I'm sure that there are a lot of Academy voters who had the same reaction that we're having.
Now, admittedly, I saw some, and the ones that were getting the most buzz at the time. And it's none of these. So, there's only one in this category that I have heard of, heard good things about, and that's 20 Days in Mariupol. And so,
Well, that's the one, based on what I was reading online, that's the one that everyone seems to think is going to win.
yeah, so that's my mail-in
But the
vote.
documentary about escaping North Korea, the missionary breaking people out of North Korea, that was an incredible story. And that was a top-rated documentary across lists at the end of last year.
Yeah.
And not nominated? Come on.
Yeah.
Maybe you should read what was nominated, because I still am having a hard time believing it.
Thank you. That's a good point for the listeners. They probably want to hear what was nominated, even if we
They
didn't see
probably
them.
don't know what they're talking about either.
So the nominees are Bobby Wine, The People's President, The Eternal Memory, Four Daughters, To Kill a Tiger, and 20 Days in Mariupol.
Yeah. No American Symphony, which is one that I
That was a huge shock.
was obviously a populist choice, but I would have expected it because it still got a lot of love. So I thought, okay, that'll probably see it here. It's nominated for song, so, but yeah.
Well, and an incredible story that was extremely well told. I was a little concerned. And this isn't always the case, but a lot of the documentaries that get made in the United States especially seem to be music documentaries,
Yeah.
or, that's a lot of the genre. Takes up a lot of the oxygen, I guess, so to speak, especially in the United States, or music documentaries. But this was far from just your standard music documentary. This is about an African-American artist trying to make a symphony that speaks to the time with underrepresented voices and underrepresented types of music in the middle of his partner, seeming to die of cancer,
Right.
So, I think that it's an incredibly emotional film, but I think it's a very, it's more than just a music film, more than just a rock
It's a human
kind
story,
of thing. It's a
too.
very human story and very well told, very inspiring. And I feel like maybe still also the Michael J. Fox film, I think is another sort of popular or populist choice maybe, but I'm really surprised that's not here. That is he has a disease that a lot of people connect with. It's a very common disease, but it's also a very common classification of diseases, of neurological disorders. And I feel like that is something that a lot of people can relate to. And he's obviously a very well-liked figure who's been very open about his experiences. So I'm really surprised that's not here.
At least one of them would have made sense here. Yeah.
I'm very shocked by the fact that literally all of the top rated, there's no still American Symphony. Those are both popular. The one I referenced earlier about the North Korean immigrants, Beyond Utopia, which was getting a lot of crazy critical acclaim. The Mission on Disney Plus was the one about the missionary who went to the country and died. It's just weird choices, I think.
And I would have liked to have seen Black Barbie in here, but it hasn't been released yet.
Next year.
Next year.
Netflix acquired it, right?
With Shondaland, through their agreement with Shondaland.
So, listeners, Black Barbie 2024. Keep your eyes open. It's a great one. Seriously, one of my favorites last year.
History of Black Barbies, yes.
Let's move on to our next category, which is Best Director. And the nominees are Justine Triet for Anatomy of Fall, Martin Scorsese for Killers of the Flower Moon, Christopher Nolan for Oppenheimer, Yorgos Lanthimos for Poor Things, and Jonathan Glazer for The Zone of Interest. And real quickly, I'm just going to say we've already talked a lot about the lack of the Greta Gerwig, and it sounds like at this table we are all in agreement that it's a sad omission. With that being said, earlier and again, what do we think of this category? Who will win, should win, Brandy?
I think that Christopher Nolan will win. I think it's hard to say that he shouldn't win. I think that there's some very good work by Justine Triet and Martin Scorsese both in this category. But again, I think that this is one of the categories that Oppenheimer pretty much has locked up. And it's hard to say he shouldn't win. I wouldn't necessarily say that I would give it to someone else over him necessarily, but I think that he will win and he should win and shouldn't not win.
Well, it's tough, right? Because then that's what makes this category so tough. There's at least 3 people here I really want to win, and 2 people here I'm like, well, I understand why you're here, and I could see how you could win. And then there's a couple people who really should been here that aren't here. But Christopher Nolan, guys, he's been cranking out hits for 20 years now, and he's championed IMAX formats.
He has the ode narrative.
He does. And not only the ode because he's just been putting in his dues for so long, but he is championing like the preservation of film in a way that other directors or few other directors are. He's certainly using his clout for a cause, and the cause being the conservation of cinema as an art form.
And he's been a great advocate of making commercially successful movies with kind of an indie director spirit.
Right.
And that's why I think his Batman movies did really well. That's why I think that, because he's bringing a certain grit to his movies that aren't, it has polish, but they're not what James Cameron level of, like, you know what I mean? Like there's still that level of auteurism that he's bringing to it.
He's classy. He brings a class and
he just finds a way to make it
sophistication.
appeal broadly. Yeah. So.
Well, and I like what Scorsese did with Killers of the Flower Moon in terms of a high level of allyship.
Yes.
Somebody who takes the fact that they have the cultural capital to do something like this and make sure that it is done in all of the right ways that you can do it, including then continuing to champion your Native American actors who has, the Oscar nomination, continuing to champion Native storytellers possibly getting a chance to tell this story. And so I think that that comes into play for me, that's one of the reasons why I would definitely love it to see him win this, because I feel like it would be all that right energy would come to it and come with it. But I do think that this is not his best film necessarily, so to speak, but I don't necessarily know whether Oppenheimer is Nolan's best film, but I wouldn't say it's not his best film definitively.
Right.
If that makes sense.
And I think with Scorsese, I kind of put him in the same category as I would Leo in this, where there was the narrative of when is he ever going to win, and then he went for The Departed, which was a good film, but
not even close to his best.
Not even
film.
close to his best work. The Revenant, good film, but not really close to Leo's best work. But they finally got it, and so I think now the ode narrative and this would probably be a more deserving director win for Scorsese. Where one that we'd be like, hey, he did a lot with this one, and but because these people have had that narrative before and have since taken home gold, I feel like that's where it hurts them in these categories.
And I think in a less competitive year, it does seem like it's an obvious Scorsese win. Because I part of me does really want to pull for Scorsese because of the allyship, because of how he brought the film to Oklahoma and shot it here. Just a real like strive for accuracy and authenticity in a way that we rarely see in Hollywood films anymore.
No care to do that.
Right.
I'm going to sell it the way I want to. It's just that,
we had the conversation about, Christopher Nolan, women problems, which we don't need to go down the rabbit hole at this time. But in general, it's like, well, you have your Scorseses who you like, he might not get it, but he will put in the work to listen and try to figure out how to take that feedback.
He hears the critiques and he's making the changes.
And Christopher Nolan's like, I hear you and I don't care.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I'm just going to make movies that I'm interested in. And I happen to be interested in making movies for and about men. That's fine.
And
anyway,
white men at that.
Yeah, true. Laron, Chapman, what are your predictions here?
Nolan. I feel like it'd be nice to see Scorsese take this, but I think because of the narrative and because of that he hasn't had this recognition on this scale, and he's finally made it to this spot. It hits his time, and he did make an incredible movie this year, that did incredibly well, was well received, and is very impressive. Again, I don't know if it's my favorite of his catalog of film, but It is definitely in the top tier of that. So this is a more than worthy, win for this. So.
Yeah, I agree. It's not my favorite of his, but I do think it's a worthy film. And hey, he made, again, 3-hour adult drama, rated R, almost $1 billion. It's unheard of. No one else can do that.
Yeah.
And he leveraged that via the IMAX to bring the IMAX back home. So I'm going to go will win, should win. There is part of me that would love to see Marty get it, because I do think this is one where you can clearly see the effort on the screen. But I don't know, sometimes it's just someone else's year.
Yeah.
And in this case, it's Chris Nolan. Let's move on to Best Actor in a Supporting Role. And the nominees are Sterling K. Brown for American Fiction, Robert De Niro for Killers of the Flower Moon, Robert Downey Jr. for Oppenheimer, Ryan Gosling for Barbie, and Mark Ruffalo, that's what that performance made me think of, for Poor Things. Laron, Chapman, what's your pick here?
This is Robert Downey Jr.'s. I used to think this was a Robert Downey Jr. versus Ryan Gosling year, but that has just not been the
Not even
case.
close.
He has been stealing every trophy at every Critics' Choice, everything, like ones that don't even matter. It's like and it's deserving. Robert, he disappears into this role. It's a very effective supporting role, and nice to see him act because he's always been a good actor, and it's just nice to see him doing something, with meat on it, and this was just like a nice buffet of everything he can do well, with his comedic and dramatic chops, and so I think this is definitely Robert Downey Jr. should and will win.
All right. Brandy?
I don't know if I've ever. It's rare to see a category. I don't say ever, but it's rare to see a category that is so competitive, but at the same time, such an obvious, clear cut,
like so many
favorite.
Like, good roles, but it's definitely that dude.
Yeah, so many great performances here. Robert De Niro is a great villain in that film,
Absolutely.
and yet is subtle enough at it that you can see how he managed to fool people. I love Sterling K. Brown in American Fiction. I think he's so good in what he does. He's so good at what he does in everything he does, but he was great in that film. Of course, Ryan Gosling taking the role of Ken and just,
shattering expectations.
Just what he does in that is just incredible. I mean, he's just does such a good, just a fantastic job. But Robert Downey Jr. is gonna win, and I find it impossible to say that he shouldn't win. And by the way, there's some makeup for you because Robert Downey Jr. is a handsome gentleman, and they managed to make him look not handsome at all.
Yeah.
But but I mean, what a performance! I mean, he's incredible.
Yeah.
It's so odd. I mean, he's just such the clear cut favorite in a category that is so competitive. But I think he should win, and I definitely think he will win.
Yeah, it's tough to argue against it, and he's going against type. It's such a subdued performance, and yet he's able to showcase what he does really well. The charisma shines through in what he doesn't do. It's wild. It's incredible, and there's no competition. Yeah, will win, should win, and I love all of these performances. And there are other nominees that people.
Charles Melton's one I would have loved to see
one
here.
I would have loved to see Dominic Sessa in here from Holdovers.
Sessa.
I mean, I think he would have done. I mean, he thought that it was an incredible performance.
But the dog in Anatomy of a Fall.
Come on, seriously. Did you see that he was at one of the award shows or some award lunch or something?
Yeah, he was at the Oscars luncheon.
Even the kid, honestly, the kid in Anatomy of a Fall was really good too. Really quiet performance, but really well done.
Crazy competitive year for supporting. I would say supporting actor and actress both, but that one in particular was It's like, it's impossible to choose, but actually Robert Downey Jr. It's so easy. Yeah. And he is owed one. Air quotes, I say owed. He's got the narrative going for him. He's been nominated a few times. I don't think he's won one yet. I think this will be his first win. I'm pretty sure. Correct me if I'm wrong, listeners. Let's move on to Best Actress in a Supporting Role. And the nominees are Emily Blunt for Oppenheimer, Danielle Brooks for The Color Purple, American Ferrera for Barbie, Jodie Foster for Naiad, Davine Joy Randolph for The Holdovers. Oh, edit. Jodie Foster should have been for True Detective, Night Country.
Great show.
Great show.
Different podcast. Great show.
Yes, different podcasts. Brandy, what's your pick here?
I think this is an interesting category because there are other performers that I would have liked to have seen in here. I would have liked to have seen some of the performers from Killers of the Flower Moon. I think Tantun Cardinal is great. I think Cara J. Myers is, every time she's on screen, you can't stop looking at her. And so I really feel like there's some other people that I would have liked to have seen in here. I would really go to the mat for including Annette Bening for Naiad. I wasn't as high on Jodie Foster's performance in that film.
Oh, okay.
It didn't light up my world, I guess, so to speak. I don't know, but I think that it certainly wasn't a horrible performance by any means, but I feel like she's a little bit of a safe pick here. But at the same time, I feel like America Ferrera had maybe the moment of the year at the movies in terms of a supporting role where you see that maybe like under the Judi Dench standard where you have the one thing that
you have the
do.
Scene.
You have the scene
that
you do
siphoned
so
and used
well.
And
and I think that that is admirable. But this is this is the same thing as supporting actor. There's just not any contest here. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like Divine Joy Randolph has won everything, and she's going to continue to win everything. And when you see that movie, you can't be mad about
Right.
it. She's magnificent in the thing. And so I think she should win. I think it's impossible to say that she shouldn't and that she will.
All right, Laron.
It's Davine Joy Randolph, and you know what I love about this is that I love that she's the front runner here, and this is not a showy performance.
That's true.
It's a
not.
very
Yeah.
understated, dialed back performance. She just stands out in her, kind of quiet suffering and empathy in that role, and I love that they're championing that because normally in this category you get a flashy one like Ken or Robert Downey Jr. and this is a quiet role, and so I like that they're going with that because there were, like you said, there were flashier things they could have done in this category. Arguably, Jodie Foster's is a louder performance,
Certainly.
but it's nice that everyone's kind of championing this very quiet but understated and really well made, really beautiful kind of performance from her, and so nice to see.
And I would say that Black actresses sometimes get that even worse, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would think that it's even nicer to say that it's a Black actress that's given an opportunity to give a very understated
role.
performance.
Because honestly, earlier in the year, the conversation was really going more towards the Danielle Brooks and Color Purple. Even before Sight Unseen, people were like, "Oh, it's the Oprah supporting role reimagined. It's going to be loud and flashy," and it was good. And I'm glad she's here. It's nice to see her, but even after seeing it, I was like, man, I bet the one that resonated with me emotionally was her. So it was Divine Joy Randolph. So nice to see. I'll be happy to see her up there.
I'll be excited to see what she does next too. I love it when we get to see these actors with, because she's, television, like she's not a movie star.
Yeah.
So to see her get this role, hit a home run with an understated performance, and then she's going to win.
Yeah.
Can't wait to see what she does next. And yeah, so no debate here. Will win, should win. This is probably the easy. This and RDJ are probably the easiest categories on the whole ballot. Yeah. The leading categories, significantly less certain, I will say. I thought for sure up until about the last month and a half is when things really shifted, because going into Best Lead Actor, it seemed like a shoo-in, Cillian Murphy. But let's first, getting ahead of myself. And the nominees for Best Actor in a Leading Role are Bradley Cooper for Maestro, Coleman Domingo for Rustin, Paul Giamatti for The Holdovers, Cillian Murphy for Oppenheimer, and Jeffrey Wright for American Fiction. Going into the season, Cillian Murphy, since the movie came out, certain, like without a doubt. And then The Holdovers came out, and people said, yeah, Paul Giamatti, he's pretty good. He's pretty good. It's a great role for him. They wrote it feels like the role feels so built for him, and he nails it.
Yeah. And
you're like, okay, well, it'll get some critical acclaim. He'll be nominated. That'll be great, and he didn't win for Sideways, but we're bringing him back in here. And like in the last month, the competition has heated up. So with that said, open the floor. LeBron Chapman, who will win, should win here.
This is hard. This is one of those things. Should is strong. It's a strong word. I love Cillian Murphy in that role, and it's an understated, it's all in his face. It's on his head. He has to shoulder a 3-hour movie, and I do feel like he does a really good job of doing a lot without saying a lot. But I have loved Paul Giamatti for so long, and I've always thought he was an unsung hero of so many movies, even bad movies. I'm like, man, but Paul Giamatti's going for it. Every supporting role, he's a great character actor. And this is just like a highlight reel for me of everything he can do. Everything is in his arsenal, dramatically, comedically, his freak outs, his manic anger. It's all there. And it ends on such a beautifully tender note. And I'm just like, God, it'd be really nice. It won't happen because it's going to be Cillian Murphy. And then as the conversation has kind of shifted as the year has gone on, as the year, I guess the year has gone on, it's nice to see that there's a possibility of a Paul Giamatti Oscar win. I would be happy with it. And so that's personally my should win. But I would not be upset if Cillian Murphy won. That said, I still think it's probably going to be Cillian Murphy.
Mm-hmm. So you were so impressed by the masterworks of Paul Giamatti of your childhood, like Big Fat Liar. And,
that's the one.
And the orangutan from the Planet of the Apes 2001. Those are the ones?
He's a chameleon. he can do anything.
Frankly, he still is actually the best parts of those movies, by the way. Brandy McDonnell, what do you think? Who's going to win Best Lead Actor?
I am a longtime Cillian Murphy fan, and I'm surprised to hear myself saying that I think that Paul Giamatti will win.
Wow, okay.
I think that you're going to see him take it. I think that there's just, again, there's some of that narrative that comes down to being owed something. He didn't get nominated for Sideways. He's been Oscar nominated before, but, I think
like
it was
Cinderella Man.
supporting actor for Cinderella Man, which, by the way, I love that movie, but y'all know I have a Achilles heel for,
Underdog sports
dramas.
movies.
Right.
Yep.
And, but he's also fantastic in it. And, but, I just feel like there's a lot going for him in terms of the narrative of awarding him for a standout career and things like that. I really do feel like you're going to see him win. Should win. I love the performance, and I would definitely say I'm not going to be mad about it. I think what Cillian Murphy does is a lot subtler and a lot maybe harder to pull off to make that character magnetic enough to sort of want to follow him through this whole 3.5 hour journey, and for him to so much in his face, because he doesn't talk that much, to sort of let all of those things sort of play out, to be a character that you want to continue to stay interested in when he does some very unsavory things. I feel like there's a lot to be said for that performance, and the more I talk about it, the more I like it. But at the same time, I really do feel like you're going to see, this is so close. It's a squeaker, but I do think you're going to see Paul Giamatti win. And I'm not going to say he shouldn't, but I think that it's a shame that these two performances are the same year. And I just, can there be a tie? Can they split an Oscar in half?
Yeah.
Killian Murphy
like
gets
that?
it and cracks it in half on the stage and calls Paul Giamatti up,
That would be the best case scenario.
Well,
right
and
there.
also I think I agree with that too. What Paul Giamatti does in the Holdovers, I will say, is not out of his wheelhouse.
He's done it before.
He's done it before, and this is just it plays to his strengths, and he's just going for it. And admittedly, I mean, on a technical level, for sure, Cillian Murphy's is more impressive in that way. And I also think, to be fair, Cillian Murphy has a very storied and caricature kind of history too. He's played many different types of.
I'm saying, like, he comes from a similar character actor background where he's one of those guys you're thinking he's never going to be a leading man, and then sure enough, no one makes this movie, and he's like, I know the guy. This is the one guy who can play this role.
Well, and I think too, you see that with Paul Giamatti with Sideways. I mean, I think you saw a rare moment where a character actor gets to play a leading man role, and then it went unsung by the Academy, and now here he is back 20 years later. He gets another chance to be a leading man. But I think it is interesting that you have these two character actors who have been such interesting careers to follow. Moments of brilliance, moments of what is happening here. I'm sorry, but then you get to this point in their career, and they're
prestige point, and
they're competing against each other.
Yeah,
it's a fascinating thing.
It's an impossible choice. That said, I'm picking Cillian Murphy.
I love that.
I hate it though, because I'm with you guys. I think Cillian Murphy's gonna squeak it out, but I will tell you, it is so much more of a race than I thought it was gonna be. And Paul Giamatti, again. We should probably, the word owed is probably not the way I like to frame it. Deserved. He's overdue in the fact that he's deserved one for a while. He's deserved the acclaim and the love, and I want him to win an Oscar. And I would love for him to win an Oscar for this role, just not this year when it's up against Cillian Murphy as Oppenheimer.
That's fair.
So I'm going to go will win, should win Cillian Murphy. But man, Paul Giamatti really could come in and swoop in, and I wouldn't be upset. Let's move on to
The Beast.
the penultimate category of our discussion today. Best Actress in a Leading Role. And the nominees are Annette Bening for Naiad, Lily Gladstone for Killers of the Flower Moon, Sandra Hüller for Anatomy of a Fall, Carey Mulligan for Maestro, and Emma Stone for Poor Things. I'm just going to start out by saying, if the Academy were to give this award to another woman who already has an Oscar, this is another Martin Scorsese thing. They already won one. Was it for the thing that they probably should have won it for? No, but they already have one.
Yeah.
And it's a great performance, but in this movie in particular, which it sounds like I'm poo-pooing on Poor Things. I just don't think this movie is going to have a big impact that people are going to be coming back to it in 10 years. So for her to win in this movie, I feel like we are going to be kicking ourselves for the next 20 years. Like the same way we were about, hey, remember how The Artist won a bunch of stuff? No one remembers that movie, but they loved it that year in that moment. They really did. And I don't know. There's another example. Green Book is another one. Hey, how did
anyone love that movie? I guess the Academy did.
It's just, I'm just going to say, before I put my official prediction in, if Emma Stone wins this, she kills it.
Yes.
Puts in 110% and a very flashy, showy performance that demands a lot of her. And she did the assignment, and it's great. But also, man, I'm going to be really upset if she wins this award. Okay, that said, Brandy McDonnell, what is your predictions?
I've been doing this for so long, guys. I don't get a knot in my stomach about the Oscars anymore. I just don't. I have a knot in my stomach about this category. I have a knot in my stomach because Lily Gladstone should win this, and Lily Gladstone deserves to win this, and she deserves to win it on every level. I mean, the quality of the performance, the ability of her to outshine co-stars that are much more heralded than her, the ability of her to carry a 3.5-hour movie as an actress who had not had a chance to be in hardly any
mainstream
large productions like that. The ability of an actress to embody all of the complicated emotions that go into this story all of it is phenomenal and incredible. The quality, and then you take all of those sort of like intangibles of it. She deserves to win it for all those reasons, but she also deserves to win it for the quality of the campaign, where you're aware of the historic nature of what you're doing, and you're championing all the right people, and you're championing all the right things, and you're taking questions on red carpets that are stupid,
dumb,
or, ignorant, or, and you're handling them all with grace and with dignity and all this kind of thing. And then you take it from that historic, sort of level as well. She's the first Native American woman ever nominated. There's never been an Indigenous woman win it.
This is the 96th or 97th?
96th.
96th
In
Oscars.
100 years, we've never given this to a woman who is Native or Indigenous. It's the first time for a Native American woman to even be nominated. Do you know how many movies have been made in that time frame that had to do with Native American women? A lot. And yet they've never been given even half of the platform in a mainstream film to show what they could do on this level. And the first time you get the opportunity, you knock it out of the park.
Yep.
Nothing should stand in the way of this woman getting an Oscar, but by golly, Emma Stone and her Yorgos film, don't get me started, with her unibrow are in the way right now. And it's bothering me.
I just, again, want to reiterate, I feel like all of us, even it's like the next day, it's like when you eat Taco Bell, you're like, oh yeah, this is great. We're going to eat Emma Stone. The next morning, every Academy member wakes up, oh man, why did we do that? That was a bad idea. Listen, up until, similarly to Paul Giamatti, up until about the last 2 months, it seemed like a no-brainer.
An absolute
no
no-brainer. Contest.
But as some of these other award shows have come in and the narrative has started sweeping up and the BAFTAs just said, we don't even care about Lily Gladstone,
or killers at all, really.
And it puts enough doubt in your mind where you're like, uh-oh, this is not as surefire as it seemed like it should be.
Yeah.
Because it should be a no-brainer. Laron Chapman.
I have so many complicated feelings here, because Poor Things is my favorite movie this year. Emma Stone is an actress I've admired for a really long time. I did not think she deserved the Oscar for La La Land. That might be a hot take. I saw this and I was like, this is the best work of this woman's career, and I understand why people are championing this performance because it is insane and there's so many levels to it. It's flashy, it's showy, it's nuanced. It's all these things are happening on a technical level. It's just so impressive. That being said, Lily Gladstone, again, ripped a movie away from acting titans in a Martin Scorsese film. When she is what you walk away with, it says that she is the soul of that movie. On top of that, we're on the precipice of a historic moment in history, something that the Oscars has a very tenuous history with. And it's just like we are so close to making a historic ceiling break. And to give a second Oscar to someone, again, gave a great performance. I'm not going to take anything away from her. Feels like Taylor Swift winning a 4th album of the year for me. I'm just like, I get it. We love this woman, but also she doesn't need it. We know she's great. We know it. We have all the accolades. We don't need to over adorn one person. There is someone in this category who did a phenomenal job, and her win is so much more significant. We need this to happen. You know what I'm saying? It needs to happen. And not only for it being a historic moment. She is phenomenal in the movie. But I'm just saying, because that is also working in tandem here, it should be a no-brainer.
Right.
It should be a no-brainer. That's how I look at it. You know, she does. We're not gonna care about 2 Emma Stone Oscars years from now. You know what I mean? But we will care that we finally have awarded this to a 3rd woman of color in 96 years of Oscars. Because the last one was last year's Michelle Yeoh, and 22 years ago, Halle Berry was the first. It's insane. It's insane that in 100 years of Oscar, we've decided that 3 women of color are deserving of this category.
And I don't trust them.
No. To do the right thing.
I don't. It seems obvious to everyone but them.
Yeah.
I don't trust them.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned Chadwick Boseman earlier. I mean,
Oh, gosh.
if they can pull off that debacle,
Yeah.
they can find a way to screw this
It's
up.
embarrassing. Anthony Hopkins wasn't even there.
He literally shows up on the call. I am glad you gave it to me, but also that Chadwick Boseman guy was pretty talented. So
And I didn't even show up because I knew it was going somewhere else. Like, okay.
yeah, I don't trust the
Embarrassing.
Academy.
I don't trust them. I can't. I don't. Like I said, palms are sweaty, mom's spaghetti. I just can't.
And my biggest anxiety comes from the fact that we're talking about this, but I don't hear a lot of conversation about the historical significance of her potentially winning this award. You know, they're kind of just talking about it very casually, like, you know, like, oh yeah, Homegirl's really good here. She's number 2, and then Emma Stone was really great. You know what I mean? It's not really. They're not really like honing in on how consequential in many ways this is from a cultural standpoint, you know, like, and so I hope that weighs on their minds when they vote, because I mean, and it's not a pity vote. It's just that it would mean a lot more, and it is deserving. So, you know.
So, Laron, I have to hold your feet to the fire. What is your official prediction?
Obviously, my shit is Lily Gladstone, and my I'm gonna go ahead and just say my will, because I'm gonna will it into existence, is Lily Gladstone as well.
We're manifesting here.
We're
gonna manifest it.
Should win, will win. Lily Gladstone, or like I said, having talked to some Native actresses about their take on her being nominated, they're ready to riot.
Oh,
if
Lord.
she doesn't win. It's like, am I invited to join your posse? It's like, yes, please march with us.
I'll march on the Academy with you guys.
I don't even think Emma Stone wants a second. She herself is like, I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to have done the role.
Listen,
she's also feeling the like, I don't need this.
All the people who are on Team Emma here, I got an idea. What if you give it to Lily Gladstone and use all this energy and put it towards her Emmy campaign for The Curse? I would be super on board with that. Frankly, okay, and this leads into my predictions. I prefer subdued performance. The older I get, I was not this way even 10 years ago, but the older I get, I really lean a lot more towards the subdued performances. What are the things that are able to emote and communicate to me without saying very many things? And I think actually Emma Stone has a very, very impressive, nuanced performance, like low-key nuanced performance in that show. But that's not this movie. That's not the performance she gave here. That said, I think will win, should win, Lily Gladstone, but I'm saying like it's like a 55 Lily, 45 Emma type feeling. It can go either way. And unlike a lot of these categories, I will be extremely upset if she doesn't win.
It's feeling a lot
I'm
like
nervous,
the
guys, I'm
political
nervous.
election this year. It's like I'd like to think, but I don't trust us.
I think I'm really glad you brought up the Chadwick Boseman thing because that is a great example of, well, obviously it should go to him and he's no longer with us. They literally moved the ceremony around to put the best lead actor at the end of the ceremony, and everyone's like, oh yeah, because they're gonna end it with a great tribute to Chadwick Boseman, Anthony Hopkins.
I will never forget what I can't even remember which one of us said it, but it was the conversation that my husband and I had after that happened. There was a long pause, but then they like immediately cut. Like they didn't even know
Oh,
what
it wrapped
to
up
do. They're
fast.
like, "Oh, we're stop. Just stop the show." And I was like, "Well, at least we legitimately know now that they have no idea who the winners are until the show.
Yep.
Like until those envelopes are actually opened, because there's no way they would have set up that show.
It's almost like
the way
everybody
it
looked at
would
each other
have
as like, "You're doing the right thing, right? You're doing the right thing. You're doing it.
Yeah.
We're all
we
doing
all
it."
get what the signals we're sending, right?
Yeah, and,
Okay.
and it's like, you know for sure that nobody knows until that envelope gets opened after a moment like that.
And this is why voting is important, and everyone should vote this year in the election. This really consequential year of elections. We don't know what people are doing at the ballot box.
Yeah, don't assume your friends voting the same way as
Don't
you.
assume.
And don't assume they're voting at all.
And don't assume that the Academy is going to do the right thing, but hope really hard. Like, put it out into the universe.
Yeah, yes. That brings us to our final category of the day.
Which I feel like is very anticlimactic.
It is.
after all.
Yeah.
It's going to be how it is at the Oscars.
Everyone
actually.
is biting their nails for Best Actress, and they're like, whatever about Best Picture.
Yeah, Best Picture. We know what's going to Oppenheimer. What are we talking about? Okay. Best Picture, just a reminder, listeners, the nominees are American Fiction, Anatomy of a Fall, Barbie, The Holdovers, Killers of the Flower Moon, Maestro, Oppenheimer, Past Lives, Poor Things, and The Zone of Interest. All right, Brandy, throw us a wild card. Who's going to win?
There isn't a wild card in this. I mean, I just feel like it's very, very obvious that it's going to Oppenheimer. I just don't feel like there's any way that it's not. I mean, I would be very shocked. I guess they've surprised me before, but I just feel like the will win is Oppenheimer. I feel like they have all of the momentum. It's just hard to imagine a scenario where it doesn't end up that way. I'm not mad about it. Like, I don't want to put down in any way Oppenheimer and the cinematic achievement that it is. Was it my favorite? No. I mean, is it in about the middle of the pack for me of this group of films? Yes. Am I surprised to see it dominate? Maybe a little bit, that it's dominated quite this much. But at the same time, I feel like it's very Oscar-y. I don't want to say it's Oscar bait, because I feel like there's a very negative connotation of that. And I wouldn't want to say that about it, because I think it does. I think part of what makes it stand out is that it takes some of those things that you think of when you think of Oscar bait, and it does it. It innovates.
Transcends
It transcends. It innovates some of those type of things. All of the movies that I would say are Oscar bait kind of movies, something that are historical, kind of epics, Killers of the Flower Moon, Zone of Interest, Oppenheimer. I think all of them do innovative and interesting things that help elevate them beyond that. The only one that I would really even consider Oscar baity kind of is Maestro.
That's the one that I feel like is turbo. That's the reason I don't like the movie.
I mean, it's the one that really feels very Oscar baitish out of all of this. So I wouldn't want to, but I feel like Oppenheimer is the type of movie that the Academy likes. It's the type of movie that Academy voters understand, and I think that you've seen, if you heard some of the takes from the old school, old guard screenwriters about Killers of the Flower Moon, you understand that not everybody is necessarily on board with the modern day thinking about cinema.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, oh, that movie should have been about about Leonardo DiCaprio and him not being a stupid guy or whatever. And it's like, really? Yeah, okay, that's
Thanks, Paul
sure.
Schrader. Yeah.
Thanks. Just why don't you not, for a minute? I feel like that is a movie. I don't feel like those people are ready for American fiction. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
I mean, or Barbie for that matter.
Yeah.
And so I feel like
to think that Barbie's not even top 3 in this sense, considering it was such a cultural sweep this year.
Because I don't think that the Academy
they don't acknowledge it that way.
They've done a lot of work in the last 2 years in trying to diversify the membership, but you can't accomplish that in 3 to 5 years after nearly a century of it predominantly being old white guys that get to vote. So, I mean, I think that it's very difficult to imagine. I just feel like Oppenheimer is a very obvious choice in this area for a lot of reasons. And that isn't to say that it isn't a deserving piece of cinema at the same time.
But it also feels like if Christopher Nolan was going to win one in his career, it's not going to be one of his sci-fi epics. It's going to be a biopic.
These guys aren't going to vote for Inception or a Batman movie. I mean, I feel like he's going to get it for making the type of movie that
they want to see.
Oscar voters like. Like I said, and that doesn't necessarily make it an undeserving film. I think it makes it
not as exciting.
Because it's a safer choice. And I don't want to say that it's a safe choice necessarily, or everybody vote for Maestro. But I think that it is a safer choice than I don't see a lot of them getting behind Anatomy of a Fall. Something like that. I don't feel like they're going, like procedural. Who would, whatever, or Past Lives. Like, I don't think that you can see them getting behind a romantic drama that's steeped in sort of Korean philosophy. I mean, that's a little bit too arcane for a lot of Oscar voters. I feel like this is and that's why I'm okay with it, I think, because it's a great film that also happens to appeal to Oscar voters.
Right.
So I feel like it's the obvious choice, and I'm not mad about it because it's truly a great piece of filmmaking, and there were some things that were done that were very innovative about it that made it infinitely more watchable than just your sort of standard Oppenheimer biopic.
And technically impressive. He could have made this movie for like $20 million probably, honestly. Strip away all the flashiness, but he said, no, I want $100 million, and it's going to be 3 hours long. It's going to be rated R. And, so yes, there are big swings. I'm going to film it on IMAX, something that no other director would do.
Right.
Which, making it safe, yes, but also safe but innovative.
Yeah.
Ron?
Personally, like in my should would probably be Past Lives or Anatomy of a Fall in this category. They're higher up on my list, even with Poor Things being my favorite movie of the year. It's not the one I want to take the gold here. But, for all the reasons that you've said, Brandy, Oppenheimer is in my top 5. I do think it is a very, significant technical achievement. And it's definitely still a Nolan film, and it appeals to the kind of Nolanisms that he's imbued in all his other films, but in a package that's palatable to a certain group of people. And so I think that if ever he was going to win an Oscar, it would have to be under these parameters. Yeah. And so that's what it is it feels like, he's made this film under the right conditions, under the right circumstances, and in the right framework for the Academy to be receptive to it. And that's fine, because it is still a good film, So my should would be a Past Lives or Anatomy of the Fall, but will win will be Oppenheimer, and I am not upset about it.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. Laron, you and I have talked about this in past years, and we talk about one of the things we look for in Best Picture is a film that feels like it's capturing the moment in some way. Sure. And I think something we haven't talked about a ton in this specific conversation, but we did a little bit in the review of Oppenheimer, that for me makes it a very deserving choice, is there's a lot of crazy stuff happening with AI right now. I know we're all talking about it, and there have been some connections I've read about, hey, you build the nuclear bomb, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. We're dealing with a really similar thing with AI right now, and I think I see the connection right now between the invention of the nuclear bomb and the invention of some of these generative AI technologies that we're building. I think it's going to age. It's going to age the movie well in the context, depending on how AI advances and depending on how we as a society respond to it. So in that way, I actually think Oppenheimer, despite being a historical biopic, is very timely in that way. And because of that, I'm willing to say, I'm happy to say, I think it will win. I still think Killers of the Flower Moon's about something very important. So, and it has my bias. That was my number one movie of last year. There's this idea of Americans reckoning with sin in a very specifically American lens that it's really, I don't know, just really connects deeply with me. But also on a more international level, you're looking at, exploring the nature and the coercive, the ways that evil coerces well-meaning people, something we talked about earlier in this conversation, that I think makes it more universal in that way too. So if I was picking, I would pick Killers of the Flower Moon only because I just think Martin Scorsese's a master and he's dealing with themes that are very relevant to my interests that I think are also very applicable to the human condition. But Oppenheimer, I think undoubtedly will win, and I think it's an extremely worthy contender here, so I'm not going to be mad about it whatsoever.
All right.
That said, anything else we want to add about the Oscars today?
I'm really happy that they included, we're having a new casting category, not this year.
Definitely not best stunts, though.
Not this year, but I think that's next. I would say, the inclusion of casting, I think that's long overdue. I'm glad that they're finally doing that. I do think stunts work should also be a category at the Oscars as well. So
yeah, but we are adding categories, which is a big step.
So.
All right, Brandy.
I'm very excited. I am very excited. Again, we've had the discussion about Lily and our hopes for her winning the Oscar, but I am very excited to see this film that was made in Oklahoma that was such a big part of Oklahoma film. And it's such a big story coming out of Oklahoma. I'm just glad to see it, contending so much in award season, hopefully getting people talking about this history, which is, I think has resonated a lot globally, maybe more than people expected, that there's a lot of indigenous populations that have been shoved aside in the name of, whatever, racism and greed largely. So I think it's very exciting to see this, film continue to be a contender throughout the award season. It broke a number of records, including in 3 different categories for either Indigenous or Native representation. So I think that's very exciting. Some other ones as well, but those 3 are particularly exciting. And I also am very excited to see Lily Gladstone's other film that was made in Oklahoma, Fancy Dance, get distribution
from Apple. Yeah.
I don't think it's going to get the size of award season campaign that Killers of the Flower Moon gets, unfortunately. But I'm very excited to see.
I think more people will watch it though now than ever would because of Killers now though.
They're gonna have a little Lily Gladstone collection on Apple. I'm serious,
That's good.
Yeah. It's nice, and so I'm excited to see that film will have a chance to contend. Looking at how stacked this year was and how competitive it was does make me a little concerned for this year in terms of with the strike and everything else. I don't have a lot of films that I'm just as excited to see as I was last year. So I'm a little concerned about who's going to be
you're
contending.
saying Dune's winning Best Picture?
So what I'm hearing is Dune all the way, baby. Next year, let's go.
Let's hope Twisters wins all the technical awards. I mean, maybe it'll be Twister for everything.
If we have an Oscar show where it's just Dune and Furiosa in every category, I'm not hating on it.
That was for us.
Yes, that was definitely just for us.
With Twisters being the Oklahoma entry, and
I'll take it.
I'll take it.
Glenn Powell for Best Lead Actor. Let's go.
I mean, as far as putting somebody in the play, it's like the very first trailer of that debuted, and I'm like, oh, he's gonna play a cocky Oklahoma/Texas. Well, okay, yeah,
fits the bill.
You know exactly how to use him, don't you?
Yes.
Glenn Powell, perfectly. It's like, who is going to play this? It's definitely gonna be Glenn Powell. I'm like, okay, so points for casting.
Yeah.
That's in that role. But
I think it's going to be a fun time. I'm looking forward to Twisters.
Yeah,
I'm hoping it's a good like B movie,
Right.
like just
sure.
elevated B movie. Let's just not make it,
But I'm a little concerned about what we're going to talk about here a year from now. It's
I
like,
agree.
what movies are we going to talk about?
Well, we are still early in the year, and there's
some cool things coming out of Sundance, but I don't think they're going to be nearly of the same scale. Or I think we're going to see a lot of indies. I think we're not going to see a lot of commercially successful movies that are nominated. I think we're going to see a lot of tiny movies getting recognition.
Will Deadpool host the Oscars next year?
Maybe.
So you're saying, though, there isn't a Anatomy of Fall, which was a hit at Sundance last year, that's gone all the way.
Yeah.
Right.
No.
Well, I'm optimistic. I don't know, in terms of prestige films, I've learned to hold my breath a little bit and wait until after May, and especially after September. If you get to September and it's looking dire, it's going to be a rough ride for the rest of the year.
For sure.
But I see your point. We did our preview episode earlier this year, and a lot of studio stuff that looks like it could be good, but in terms of like Oscar caliber stuff, it's
not much.
I mean, Mickey 17 was on the docket, and I don't know if that's an Oscar movie, but it is from Bong Joon-ho. But even that got pulled off the release calendar, so I don't know.
Yeah,
we'll see.
It's just hard. I mean, I think we're going to look at this year and think, man.
Last year, we were spoiled.
We had some movies that were really duking it out.
Oh, yeah.
That were absolutely, like it was tough to. It was a little bit of, a Hunger Games to see who was going to get to the top. And next year we might all be hungry.
Yeah.
I would say to put a pin in it. 2023, I legitimately think is one of the greatest years at the movies in my lifetime. Top 5 probably. I mean, in recent memory, certainly.
Yeah.
I mean, because it was bangers, prestige movies, blockbusters,
and
indies,
quality blockbusters.
Yeah,
like Barbenheimer. Like that. What a fun weekend. So.
Yeah. And now we're going back into the desert, as it may.
Literally.
With that said, Brandy, where can people follow you and your work online?
Well, Oklahoman.com is the Oklahoman's website, and that's primarily what I spend my time doing is making that look fabulous.
And you have a ton of amazing Killers of the Flower Moon coverage from over the years.
We have, and we have more coming. We're going to do a follow-up interview with Yancey Redcorn. He was the one who played the chief in that, and he is an Osage actor from here in Oklahoma. He lives in Norman. We did a Q&A with him, but it got cut a little bit short, and some of his experiences got cut a little bit short because of the SAG strike. And so we're getting a chance to kind of revisit with him. And I wish Angela was here because I guess in some of the native press, he's been labeled that sort of a hot uncle. He's kind of got hot uncle energy. So he's kind of been in that sort of native press world, a little bit of emerged as an unlikely sex symbol, maybe a little bit. So that'll be a fun thing.
I mean, he looks great on the stage at the award shows he shows up.
Yeah. He really does. And then we are going to talk to Scott George as well, the composer that was nominated, and hopefully a few other Osage folks who worked on some of the different parts of the film. One of the things I think is interesting to note is on a big picture like that, it is a team effort, right? I mean, somebody is the costume designer or the production designer who gets that sort of, nomination. But there are a lot of Osage folks who were on the team for that to make sure that it was at top levels of accuracy. So we're going to talk to some of those folks as well. So it should be a fun time leading up to the Oscars this year.
The Oklahoman, ladies and gentlemen, check it out online. Lots of great coverage, a lot of exclusive coverage for that matter. Laron, Chapman?
You can follow my reviews on the cinematropolis.com.
And of course, you can follow me always on the Cinematropolis on the social media channels. Letter C Masters Talk. That's spelled with the letter C Masters Talk. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. We'll catch you again next time in our review of the hotly anticipated Dune Part 2. It's going to be a good one.